They say one act of kindness can change your life forever. But what if it destroys everything first? When Ethan Ward and his two little girls stopped on that rain-soaked highway to save a dying stranger, he thought he was just doing the right thing. He had no idea that the man bleeding out on the asphalt was worth billions, or that saving him would turn Ethan from hero to villain overnight. Stay with me until the end of this story and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this journey takes us. The rain came down in sheets that Thursday night, the kind of relentless downpour that turned highways into rivers and made even the bravest drivers second-guess their journey. Ethan Ward gripped the steering wheel of his battered 2003 Ford pickup with both hands, his knuckles white against the cracked leather. The windshield wipers beat a steady rhythm, swish, 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 but they were losing the battle against the deluge. "Daddy, I can't see anything," Grace said from the back seat, her 10-year-old voice tinged with worry. "It's okay, sweetheart," Ethan replied, though his own visibility was reduced to maybe 15 feet ahead. "We're almost home, just a few more miles." 7-year-old Lucy pressed her face against the rain-streaked window, her breath fogging the glass. "The sky looks angry," she whispered. Ethan couldn't disagree. The storm had rolled in fast and mean, the kind of weather that made the evening news and got meteorologists excited. He'd left the garage late. Mrs. Henderson's Buick had needed more work than expected, and now he was paying for it, navigating Route 47 in conditions that would make a submarine captain nervous. The girls had been troopers, waiting patiently at the shop while he worked. They always were. Ever since their mother, Sarah, had passed 3 years ago from cancer, the three of them had learned to be a team. Grace had stepped up in ways no 10-year-old should have to, helping Lucy with homework and making sandwiches when Ethan worked double shifts. Lucy, despite being the youngest, had developed an emotional wisdom that sometimes took Ethan's breath away. "Can we have mac and cheese when we get home?" Lucy asked, her voice hopeful. "The good kind? The one with the powder?" Grace added. Ethan smiled despite his exhaustion. "Yeah, baby girls. The good kind. With extra butter, just how you—" The words died in his throat. Through the curtain of rain, illuminated by a flickering streetlight that was barely hanging on, Ethan saw it. A black car, sleek and expensive-looking even in its destroyed state, wrapped around a metal utility pole like a broken toy. Steam or smoke, he couldn't tell which, rose from the crumpled hood. The driver's side door hung open at an odd angle. "Oh my God," Ethan breathed. "Daddy?" Grace's voice climbed an octave. Ethan's foot moved to the brake without conscious thought. The pickup's worn pads squealed in protest as they slowed. Through the rain, Ethan could make out a figure slumped halfway out of the vehicle, illuminated by the car's remaining functioning headlight. "Stay in the truck," Ethan commanded, already reaching for the door handle. "But Daddy," Lucy started. "Grace, lock the doors after me. Keep your sister safe. I'll be right back." Ethan pushed open the door and immediately the full force of the storm hit him. The rain was cold, needle-sharp, driven nearly horizontal by the wind. Within 3 steps, he was soaked through his work shirt, his steel-toed boots splashing through puddles that had formed in the uneven pavement. As he got closer to the wreck, details emerged from the darkness. The car was a Mercedes. Not just any Mercedes, but an S-Class, the kind that cost more than Ethan made in 3 years. Maybe 4. The front end was accordioned, the hood crumpled like paper. Glass glittered on the wet asphalt like scattered diamonds. The man was maybe in his 60s, silver-haired, wearing what had once been an expensive suit. Now it was torn and soaked with rain and blood. So much blood. It poured from a gash on his head and what looked like a serious wound in his side, mixing with the rainwater and spreading across the pavement in diluted crimson streams. "Sir!" Ethan shouted over the storm, dropping to his knees beside the man. "Sir, can you hear me?" The man's eyes fluttered open, pale blue, clouded with pain and confusion. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Ethan's mind raced, years of fixes and solutions flowing through his mechanic's brain. But this wasn't a car. This was a person, a dying person. He fumbled for his phone with shaking hands, nearly dropping it twice in the rain. No signal. Of course there was no signal. This stretch of Route 47 was a dead zone on good days, and tonight the storm was probably taking down cell towers. "Someone call 911!" Ethan screamed into the darkness, but the road stretched empty in both directions. No other cars. No help. Wait, there were people. Ethan squinted through the rain and saw them now, maybe 6 or 7 figures huddled under the awning of a closed gas station 30 feet away. They were watching. Several had their phones out, not calling for help, but recording. The blue glow of their screens reflected off the wet concrete. "Help me!" Ethan shouted at them. "Call an ambulance!" One man, young and wearing a designer jacket that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly rent, shrugged. "Already called, dude. They're on their way." "Well, come help me then." The man made a face like Ethan had suggested he jump into a pool of sewage. "Nah, man. Rich people got insurance for this kind of thing, not trying to catch a lawsuit." A woman beside him nodded, her phone still recording. "Besides, might be drunk driving. Don't want to get involved in that." Ethan felt a surge of anger so hot it cut through the cold rain. "He's bleeding out." But they just stood there, safe and dry and useless. The man on the ground made a wet, gurgling sound. His hand reached up weakly, grasping at nothing. Ethan looked down and saw the light fading from those pale blue eyes. He'd seen that look before, in his wife's eyes those final days in the hospital. That look of someone slipping away. "No," Ethan said firmly. "No, you're not dying on me tonight." He looked back at his truck. Through the rain-blurred windows, he could see 2 small faces pressed against the glass, watching their father. Grace had her arm around Lucy. Ethan made a decision. "Grace," he shouted. "Baby, I need you to be brave." The truck door flew open and Grace scrambled out, her pink raincoat immediately plastered to her thin frame. She ran to her father without hesitation. "What do we do?" she asked, her young voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "The first aid kit in the glove box. Bring it to me, and the emergency blanket." Grace turned and splashed back to the truck. Through the window, Ethan could see Lucy starting to climb out too. "Lucy, no! Stay in the truck, baby!" But Lucy was already out, her smaller raincoat bright yellow against the darkness. She ran to her father and sister, her sneakers squelching in the puddles. "I want to help too," she said, and Ethan heard Sarah in her voice. That stubborn determination that meant arguing was pointless. "Okay," he said, swallowing hard. "Okay, both of you listen carefully." Grace returned with the first aid kit, a small red box Ethan had always kept stocked because you never knew when you'd slice your hand on an engine part. It had bandages, antiseptic, and some gauze. Nowhere near enough for what they were facing, but it was something. Ethan tore open his work shirt, buttons flying, fabric ripping, and pressed it against the worst wound, the one on the man's side. The shirt turned red almost immediately. Grace opened the gauze packs, all of them. "Lucy, hold his hand and talk to him. Don't let him close his eyes, baby. Keep him awake." "What do I say?" Lucy's voice trembled. "Anything. Everything. Just keep him here with us." Lucy knelt in the spreading pool of rainwater and blood, seemingly unaware of either, and took the man's hand in both of hers. Her small fingers wrapped around his larger ones, and she leaned close to his face. "Hi," she said softly. "My name is Lucy. Lucy Ward. What's your name?" The man's lips moved. Charles." "Charles," Lucy repeated like she was committing it to memory. "That's a nice name. My grandpa was named Charles. I never met him, but Daddy says he was really brave." "Are you brave, Charles?" Grace worked beside her father, her small hands surprisingly steady as she opened package after package of gauze. Ethan pressed them against the wounds, one after another, watching them turn red, trying desperately to slow the bleeding. "You're gonna be okay," Lucy continued, her voice taking on a sing-song quality, like she was telling a bedtime story. "My daddy fixes everything, cars, our washing machine, my bike when the chain came off. He fixed our house when the pipes broke and water went everywhere. He even fixed my teddy bear when the stuffing came out. He's really, really good at fixing things." "That's right," Ethan murmured, not even sure if the man could hear him. "Just hang on, Charles. Help is coming. You're going to be fine." But would he? Ethan had no idea. The man had lost so much blood. His skin was waxy and pale, his breathing shallow and irregular. How long did it take for an ambulance to arrive? 5 minutes? 10? 20 in this storm? "Tell me about your teddy bear," Charles whispered, so quietly that Ethan almost missed it. Lucy's face lit up. "His name is Mr. Buttons. He's brown and soft, and he only has one eye now because I loved it too much and it fell off. But Daddy says that just means he's been loved properly. Do you have a teddy bear, Charles? Had one long time ago. What was his name? Winston. My mother? She made it? That's beautiful, Lucy said, and there were tears mixing with rain on her cheeks now, but her voice stayed strong. I bet Winston was really special. Did you take him everywhere? Everywhere, until I got too old. You're never too old for teddy bears, Lucy said firmly. That's what Mommy used to say. She said teddy bears help us remember that it's okay to need comfort and love no matter how big we get. Ethan felt something break in his chest. He'd forgotten Sarah had said that. He'd forgotten so many little things she'd said, and here was Lucy, keeping those words alive. Your mommy sounds wise, Charles breathed. She was. She's in heaven now, but she still helps us, I think. She sends us signs sometimes, like rainbows and stuff. Grace finished with the gauze and pressed her father's jacket against the head wound. The bleeding is slowing down, she said quietly to Ethan, and he heard the question in her voice. Is that good or bad? It could mean the bleeding was under control, or it could mean the man's heart was giving up, too weak to pump anymore. You're doing great, Grace. Just keep pressure there. Gentle but firm. The three of them worked in the rain, a strange tableau in the middle of an empty highway. A mechanic and his two daughters, fighting death with nothing but first aid supplies and determination. Time became elastic. Seconds stretched into hours. Hours compressed into moments. Lucy kept talking, telling Charles about her school, about her favorite color, purple, about the stray cat that sometimes came to their back porch, and how they named him Whiskers even though they weren't allowed to keep him. Grace kept pressure on the wounds, her young face set in concentration. Ethan rotated through the bandages, checking Charles's pulse every few seconds. Weak, but there. Still there. From under the awning, the onlookers continued to watch and record. Ethan could hear their murmurs, their commentary. Those kids shouldn't be out there. What kind of father puts his daughters in danger like that? It's for the cameras, obviously, trying to go viral. Someone should call CPS. Ethan blocked them out. Let them talk. Let them judge. Right now, nothing mattered except keeping Charles alive until help arrived. I can hear something, Grace said suddenly, tilting her head. At first, Ethan heard nothing over the rain. Then, faint but growing stronger, sirens. Hold on, Charles, Lucy whispered urgently. Help is coming. You just gotta hold on a little bit longer. The sirens grew louder. Red and white lights began to strobe through the rain, throwing wild shadows across the road. An ambulance pulled up, followed by a police car. Doors flew open and paramedics rushed out, their movements quick and professional. Step back, sir, one of them said, a young black woman with kind eyes. We've got him now. Ethan didn't want to let go. His hands were covered in blood, his shirt was ruined, and for the past 10 minutes this stranger's life had been his sole responsibility. Letting go felt like giving up. Sir, the paramedic said more firmly, you did good, but we need space to work. Ethan nodded and pulled back, gathering his daughters to him. They were soaked, shivering, Lucy still clutching Charles's hand until the last possible second. The paramedics swarmed the man with practiced efficiency. IV lines, oxygen, rapid-fire medical terminology that Ethan couldn't follow. They loaded Charles onto a stretcher, moved him into the ambulance. One of the paramedics, an older man with gray at his temples, stopped beside Ethan as his partner prepared the ambulance for transport. You saved his life, he said quietly. When we got the call, dispatch said it had been over 15 minutes since the accident. No one should survive that long with injuries like his without help. You gave him a chance. Will he make it? Ethan asked. The paramedic glanced back at the ambulance. I don't know, but he wouldn't have had any chance at all without you. He looked at Grace and Lucy, their small forms pressed against their father. Brave kids you got there. The bravest, Ethan agreed. The ambulance pulled away, sirens wailing, and suddenly the night felt very quiet despite the rain. A police officer approached, a woman in her 40s with a no-nonsense expression. I'm going to need a statement, she said, pulling out a notepad. Ethan gave her the facts, what he'd seen, what he'd done, what the bystanders had done, or more accurately, hadn't done. The officer wrote it all down, her expression never changing, though Ethan thought he saw a flicker of something, disgust maybe, when she glanced over at the onlookers who were now dispersing, their entertainment over. "You did a good thing tonight, Mr. Ward," she said when they were finished. "A lot of people wouldn't have stopped." "A lot of people didn't stop," Ethan replied, more bitterly than he'd intended. The officer nodded. "Yeah, I saw." She tucked her notepad away. "Get those girls home and warm. They've seen enough tonight." Ethan gathered his daughters and shepherded them back to the truck. Grace climbed in first, helping Lucy up. Both of them were shaking now, shock and cold setting in. Ethan turned the heat on full blast and pulled out the emergency blankets from behind the seats, wrapping one around each girl. "Daddy," Lucy said, her teeth chattering, "is Charles going to be okay?" "I don't know, baby, but we did everything we could." "Will we ever see him again?" Grace asked. Ethan thought about the expensive car, the designer suit, the world of wealth and privilege that Charles clearly came from. Their world and Ethan's world didn't intersect. This was a moment out of time, a collision of circumstances that would never be repeated. "Probably not, sweetheart, but that's okay. We didn't help him to get anything back. We helped him because it was the right thing to do." "Because that's what Mommy would have done," Lucy said, and it wasn't a question. "Yeah," Ethan said softly, his throat tight. "That's exactly what Mommy would have done." He put the truck in gear and pulled back onto the highway. In the rearview mirror, he could see the wreckage receding, the broken streetlight still flickering over the scene. By morning, it would all be cleaned up, the evidence of near tragedy erased. Life would go on. The rain began to ease as they drove, the storm passing as quickly as it had arrived. By the time they pulled up to their small rental house on the edge of town, only a light drizzle remained. Inside, Ethan got the girls out of their wet clothes and into warm pajamas. He made the promised mac and cheese, though none of them had much appetite. Lucy fell asleep at the table, her head resting on her arms, and Ethan carried her to the bedroom she shared with Grace. "Daddy?" Grace whispered as he tucked Lucy in. "Yeah, baby? I was scared tonight." "I know, me too." "But you weren't acting scared." Ethan sat on the edge of the bed and brushed hair back from Lucy's sleeping face. "Being brave doesn't mean not being scared, Grace. It means being scared and doing what needs to be done anyway." "Is that what you and Lucy did tonight?" "That's what all three of us did tonight." Grace was quiet for a moment. "Some of those people said mean things. I heard them. They said you were doing it for attention." Ethan felt anger flare again, but he pushed it down. "Some people don't understand why someone would help without expecting something in return. That's their problem, not ours." "I understand," Grace said firmly. "We help people because it's right, because we're wards, and wards help." Ethan kissed her forehead. "That's right, baby. Wards help." He left the door cracked open and went back to the kitchen to clean up. His hands were still stained with blood. He scrubbed them at the sink, watching the water run pink, then red, then clear again. But he could still feel it, sticky and warm, the evidence of a life almost lost. His phone, which he'd left on the counter, buzzed. A text from his boss. "Saw the news, you okay?" "News?" Ethan opened his browser and felt his stomach drop. The video was everywhere. Someone had posted it. The rain, the wreck, Ethan and his daughters huddled around Charles, fighting to keep him alive. The video had been taken from the gas station awning, and the angle made it look almost cinematic. The title made Ethan's blood run cold. "Single dad uses kids as props in dramatic rescue for social media clout." He clicked on it with trembling fingers. The video played. There he was, tearing his shirt off, shouting for help. There were his girls, Grace bringing supplies, Lucy holding the dying man's hand. It all looked so staged from this angle, so perfectly dramatic. The comments were already piling up. "This is disgusting, using his kids for views. Call CPS, those children are in danger." Obviously set up. No one is that stupid to bring kids into a situation like that. Betty crashed the car himself for the viral video. Single dad looking for sympathy and donations. Pathetic. But there were other comments too. "Are you all insane? This man saved someone's life." "Those kids are heroes. All three of them. Everyone judging him should ask themselves if they would have stopped. The people recording and doing nothing are the real villains here." The video had 10,000 views, then 20,000. The number kept climbing as Ethan watched, his stomach churning. His phone buzzed again. His sister, Rachel. "Ethan, what the hell? Call me." Another buzz. An unknown number. "Is this the man from the rescue video?" And another, "Channel 7 News would like to do an interview." Ethan turned off his phone and sat in the dark kitchen, his head in his hands. They'd done the right thing. He knew they'd done the right thing. So why did he feel like he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life? Outside, the rain had stopped completely. The clouds were breaking up, revealing glimpses of stars. Somewhere in the city, in a hospital Ethan didn't know the name of, Charles was fighting for his life. Did he know what had happened after the ambulance drove away? Did he know that the simple act of helping him was turning into a nightmare? Ethan thought about Sarah, about what she would say if she were here. She would tell him to hold his head high. She would tell him that public opinion didn't matter when you knew in your heart you'd done right. She would tell him to protect their girls and ignore the noise. But Sarah wasn't here. Sarah was gone, and Ethan was alone with two sleeping children who'd witnessed something terrible and beautiful tonight, and he had no idea how to protect them from what was coming. He walked to the girls' bedroom and stood in the doorway, watching them sleep. Grace had her arm thrown over Lucy, protective even in her dreams. Lucy was curled up with Mr. Buttons clutched to her chest, her face peaceful. They'd been so brave tonight, so impossibly, heartbreakingly brave. And now the world was going to crucify them for it. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. Let them come. Let them judge and criticize and tear him apart on social media. He would take it all if it meant his girls were safe. He would be their shield, the way he'd been taught by Sarah, the way his own father had been for him and his brother Daniel before. Ethan stopped, his breath catching. Daniel. He hadn't thought about his older brother in months, maybe longer. Daniel had been everything Ethan wasn't: educated, ambitious, successful. He'd worked in finance, made real money, moved in circles where people wore suits that cost more than cars. But Daniel had stayed grounded, stayed kind. He'd been the one who'd helped Ethan and Sarah with the down payment on their first house. He'd been the one who'd paid for Sarah's experimental cancer treatments when the insurance ran out. And then, 6 years ago, Daniel's car had gone off a bridge in the fog. They'd never even recovered his body. Ethan wondered what Daniel would think of tonight. Would he be proud? Would he understand why Ethan had stopped, why he'd brought his girls into something dangerous? The answer came immediately. Of course he would. Daniel had always said that Ethan had the biggest heart of anyone he knew. "You're the best of us, little brother," he'd said once. "Don't ever let anyone tell you different." Ethan wiped his eyes and went to his own bedroom. He pulled out the old wooden box he kept on the top shelf of his closet, the one filled with memories. Photos of Sarah, of Daniel, of happier times. At the bottom was Sarah's last gift to him, a handkerchief she'd embroidered while in the hospital, too weak to do much else but determined to leave him with something made by her own hands. The stitching was uneven, the letters shaky. "For my hero, love always, S." Ethan pressed it to his face and let himself cry. For Sarah, for Daniel, for the innocence his daughters had lost tonight, for the man they'd saved and might never see again, for the unfairness of doing right and being punished for it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The video would spread further. The comments would get worse. People would judge, criticize, maybe even threaten. His boss might not let him come back to work. The girls might face bullying at school. But tonight, they had saved a life. Tonight, they had been heroes. And whatever came next, Ethan would face it the same way he'd faced everything else since Sarah died. One day at a time, one step at a time, with his daughters by his side. He fell asleep with the handkerchief clutched in his hand and Sarah's voice in his ear, telling him what she always had. "You're stronger than you think, Ethan Ward. You always have been." In the dark house, 3 hearts beat with the steady rhythm of the righteous. They didn't know that their lives had just changed forever. They didn't know that the man they'd saved was more than just wealthy. He was powerful enough to move mountains. They didn't know that sometimes doing the right thing comes with a price, but that price is followed by rewards beyond imagining. They only knew that they'd done what the Wards always did. They'd helped when no one else would. And that, in the end, was all that mattered. Morning came too soon. announced by pale sunlight filtering through the thin curtains of Ethan's bedroom and the insistent buzzing of his phone. He'd forgotten to turn it back on. No, wait, he'd turned it off. The buzzing meant it had somehow restarted itself, or maybe he'd just dreamed turning it off. His head felt stuffed with cotton, his eyes gritty from too little sleep. The buzzing continued, relentless. Ethan groaned and reached for the phone, squinting at the screen. 43 missed calls, 67 text messages. His email icon showed 99 plus unread messages. His social media apps, which he barely used, were lighting up with notifications that seemed to multiply even as he watched. "What the hell?" he muttered, thumb hovering over the phone. From down the hall came the sound of small feet padding across hardwood floors. Lucy appeared in his doorway, Mr. Buttons dangling from one hand, her yellow pajamas rumpled. "Daddy, there are people outside," she said, her voice small. Ethan sat up fast, instantly awake. "What people?" "People with cameras." Grace counted 6 of them. Ethan's blood ran cold. He stumbled out of bed, still in yesterday's clothes. He'd been too exhausted to change, and went to the front window. He pulled back the curtain a fraction of an inch and felt his stomach drop to his feet. Lucy hadn't been exaggerating. There were at least 6 people on his lawn and the sidewalk beyond, some with professional-looking cameras, others with phones. A van with a satellite dish on top was parked across the street. As Ethan watched, a woman in a red blazer checked her makeup in a compact mirror while a man adjusted a camera on his shoulder. "Daddy?" Lucy's hand slipped into his. "What do they want?" Before Ethan could answer, Grace appeared, already dressed in jeans and a sweater. She looked worried but determined, so much older than 10. "They've been there since I woke up," she said. "I looked them up on the iPad. They're reporters. From the news." Ethan's phone buzzed again. He looked down at the screen. A text from an unknown number. "Mr. Ward, this is Melissa Chang from Channel 7. We'd like to speak with you about last night's heroic rescue. Can you come out for a brief interview?" Another buzz. "Ethan, it's Tom from The Record. We're running a front-page story. Would love your perspective." And another. "NBC wants to fly you and your daughters to New York for Good Morning America." "This is insane," Ethan breathed. "What do we do?" Grace asked, and for the first time since last night, he heard fear in her voice. Ethan's mind raced. He needed to get the girls to school, needed to get to work, needed to live his life. But how could he do any of that with cameras pointed at his front door? "Okay," he said, forcing calm into his voice. "Here's what we're going to do. You two get dressed and have breakfast. I'm going to go out there and talk to them, ask them to leave." "What if they don't?" Lucy asked. "Lucy's, they will. They have to. This is our property." But even as he said it, Ethan wasn't sure he believed it. He pulled on a clean shirt, ran his fingers through his hair, not that it helped much, and steeled himself. Before opening the door, he knelt down in front of his daughters. "Whatever happens out there, whatever they say or ask, remember this. We did the right thing last night. We helped someone who needed it. That's all that matters." Grace nodded seriously. Lucy threw her arms around his neck and squeezed tight. "You're the best daddy," she whispered. Ethan's throat constricted. He kissed the top of her head and stood up. Then he opened the door. The effect was immediate. Every camera swiveled toward him. The woman in the red blazer plastered on a smile and rushed forward, her cameraman scrambling to keep up. "Mr. Ward, Melissa Chang, Channel 7 News. Can you tell us about last night's dramatic rescue?" "How did you know to stop?" shouted another reporter. "Were you scared for your daughter's safety? Is it true the victim was a millionaire?" The questions came rapid fire, overlapping, a wall of sound that made Ethan's head spin. He held up his hands. "Please," he said, and was surprised when they actually quieted down. "Please, I need you all to leave. My daughters have school, I have work, and we need privacy." "Just a few questions, Mr. Ward," Melissa Chang said, her smile never wavering. "The public is calling you a hero. How does that feel?" "I'm not a hero. I just helped someone who needed it. Anyone would have done the same." "But anyone didn't," said a male reporter from the back. "Our footage shows at least 7 people standing by and doing nothing." "Why do you think you were the only one who stopped?" Ethan felt heat rising in his chest. You'd have to ask them that. Some people online are saying you staged the whole thing for attention, Melissa Chang said, and though her tone stayed pleasant, Ethan caught the glint in her eye. This was the question she'd really wanted to ask. How do you respond to those accusations? That's ridiculous, Ethan said flatly. I didn't even know anyone was filming until after the ambulance left. But you did bring your young daughters into a dangerous situation. Some child welfare advocates are calling for an investigation. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. My daughters helped save a man's life. They were brave and compassionate, and I'm proud of them. So you don't regret putting them at risk? I regret that we live in a world where people would rather film someone dying than help them, Ethan snapped. Now please, get off my property. He turned and went back inside, closing the door firmly. His hands were shaking. Through the window, he could see the reporters conferring, but to his relief, they began packing up their equipment. The van with the satellite dish pulled away. Within 10 minutes, his lawn was empty again. But the damage was done. Ethan could feel it, a cold certainty settling in his gut. He made breakfast on autopilot, scrambled eggs and toast, Lucy's favorite, while the girls ate quietly. Grace kept glancing at her phone, her expression growing more troubled. Grace, what is it? Ethan finally asked. She bit her lip, then turned the phone toward him. On the screen was a news article. Hero or reckless? Single fathers rescue sparks debate on child safety. Ethan skimmed the article, his stomach churning with each paragraph. The writer had interviewed a child psychologist who expressed deep concern about exposing children to trauma. A lawyer discussed potential negligence charges. An anonymous source, probably one of the people from the gas station, claimed Ethan had been showing off for the cameras. It's not fair, Grace said, her eyes shining with tears. You were helping. We were helping. Why are they being so mean? Ethan sat down beside her and pulled her close. Sometimes people don't understand things they didn't experience themselves. They make judgments from safety without knowing what it felt like to be there in that moment. But we know, Lucy said fiercely. We know the truth. That's right, baby, and that's what matters. Ethan's phone rang. He glanced at the screen. Dave's auto repair. His boss. I need to take this, he said, stepping into the other room. Hello? Ethan. Dave's voice was tight, uncomfortable. We need to talk. Dave, if this is about the cameras are just the start, buddy. I've been getting calls all morning. Customers asking if you're the guy from the video. Some want to shake your hand. Others? He trailed off. Others what? Dave sighed. Others are saying they don't want someone with questionable judgment working on their cars. Mrs. Peterson called and canceled her appointment. So did the Johnsons. 3 more left messages saying they're taking their business elsewhere. Ethan closed his eyes. Dave, I saved a man's life. I know that. And personally, I think what you did was incredible. But Ethan, I'm running a business here. I can't afford to lose customers because of controversy. So what are you saying? I'm saying take a few days off. Let this blow over. Once the news cycle moves on to something else, everything will go back to normal. And if it doesn't blow over? The silence on the other end spoke volumes. Just take the week off, Ethan. Paid. We'll reassess next Monday. The line went dead. Ethan stood there, phone pressed to his ear, listening to nothing. Paid leave. That was something, at least. But the unspoken threat hung in the air. If the controversy didn't die down, he'd be out of a job. He returned to the kitchen to find Grace packing Lucy's lunch with mechanical efficiency. Both girls watched him with worried eyes. Everything okay, Daddy? Lucy asked. Ethan forced a smile. Everything's fine. Change of plans. I'm off work this week, which means I get to drive you to school. The drive to Riverside Elementary was tense. Ethan kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see reporters following them, but the streets remained clear. The girls were quieter than usual, staring out the windows. As they pulled into the school parking lot, Ethan saw clusters of parents standing together, talking in low voices. Several of them turned to stare as his truck rumbled past. A few smiled and waved. Others whispered behind their hands, their expressions judgmental. Want me to walk you in? Ethan offered, but Grace shook her head. We'll be okay, Daddy. Lucy hugged him tight before sliding out of the truck. Love you, Daddy. Love you too, baby girls. Both of you. If anyone gives you trouble, you call me immediately, okay? They nodded and headed toward the entrance, Grace's arm protectively around Lucy's shoulders. Ethan watched until they disappeared inside, then sat in his truck for a long moment, trying to quiet the anxiety churning in his chest. His phone buzzed. Another text from an unknown number. You don't know me, but I was at the gas station last night. I'm sorry I didn't help. You shamed me into being a better person. Thank you. Ethan stared at the message, something warm flickering in his chest. Then another text arrived. People like you make me sick. Using your kids for fame. I hope they take them away from you. The warmth died instantly. Ethan deleted both messages and drove home, the morning already feeling like it had lasted a week. The house felt too empty, too quiet. Ethan tried to distract himself with chores, dishes, laundry, fixing the leaky faucet he'd been meaning to get to for months. But his phone kept buzzing with messages, notifications, requests for interviews. Social media was a cesspool of opinions, hot takes, strangers who'd never met him deciding whether he was hero or villain. By lunchtime, the video had 5 million views. By mid-afternoon, it was trending on 3 different platforms. By the time Ethan had to pick up the girls from school, someone had created a GoFundMe page in his name without his permission. It had raised $40,000. The comments section was a battlefield. This man deserves our support. This is a scam. Report it. Those girls are angels. God bless this family. CPS needs to investigate immediately. Ethan felt like he was losing his mind. He'd saved a man's life, and somehow that single act of decency had spiraled into this nightmare of public scrutiny and judgment. When he pulled up to the school, his heart sank. Grace and Lucy were sitting on the curb by themselves, away from the other kids. As they climbed into the truck, Ethan could see tear tracks on Lucy's cheeks. What happened? He asked, fighting to keep his voice calm. Nothing, Grace said quickly, too quickly. Gracie, she looked at her hands. Some kids were saying stuff about the video, about how we were faking it for money. And Lucy told them they were liars, and then Grace's voice cracked. And then Mrs. Morrison came over and said we shouldn't spread the argument around. She said both sides had valid points. Ethan's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. Both sides? She said some people think what we did was brave, and some people think it was dangerous, and everyone's entitled to their opinion. Grace looked up, her eyes blazing with anger and hurt. But Daddy, there aren't two sides. We helped someone. That man was dying. I know, baby, I know. It's not fair. Grace's composure finally cracked, and she started crying in earnest. We did everything right, and everyone's being so mean. Lucy was crying too now, and Ethan pulled the truck over to the side of the road and climbed into the back seat, pulling both his daughters into his arms. Listen to me, he said fiercely. Both of you listen. What we did last night was right, unquestionably, absolutely right. And yes, the world is being cruel and unfair right now. Yes, people are judging us without knowing the truth, but we know the truth. Charles knows the truth. And someday, when you're older and you look back on this, you'll know you were brave when it mattered most. But it hurts, Lucy sobbed. Why does doing the right thing hurt so much? Ethan didn't have an answer for that. Sarah would have known what to say. Sarah always knew how to make sense of the senseless. But Sarah was gone, and Ethan was fumbling in the dark, trying to be enough for these 2 girls who deserved so much more than a world that punished kindness. Sometimes, he said slowly, doing the right thing costs us something. But that doesn't make it wrong. It just makes it hard. And we're strong enough to handle hard things. We've proven that already. They sat there on the side of the road for a long time, 3 broken hearts beating against each other, taking what comfort they could from proximity and love. When they finally made it home, Ethan made dinner, spaghetti with meat sauce, another favorite, and put on a movie the girls had seen 100 times, anything to provide normalcy, routine, escape from the chaos of the outside world. His phone rang just as they were settling in. An unknown number, but something made Ethan answer it. Mr. Ward? A woman's voice, professional and cool. This is Linda Martinez from Child Protective Services. Ethan's blood turned to ice. Yes? We've received several reports expressing concern about your daughter's welfare following the incident last night. I'm calling to inform you that we'll need to conduct a home visit to assess the situation. You can't be serious. I assure you, Mr. Ward, we take all reports seriously. This is standard procedure. My daughter's helped save a man's life. Ethan's voice rose despite his efforts to stay calm. There's nothing to assess. Nevertheless, we have protocols to follow. I can schedule a visit for tomorrow afternoon if that works for you. And if I say no, then we'll have to escalate the matter. I'm sure you don't want that, Mr. Ward, for your daughter's sake. The implied threat was clear. Ethan closed his eyes and counted to 10. Tomorrow afternoon is fine. Excellent. I'll see you at 2 o'clock. Please ensure both children are present. The line went dead. Ethan stood there, phone in hand, feeling like the ground was crumbling beneath his feet. CPS. They were sending Child Protective Services because he'd saved a man's life, because he'd taught his daughters compassion and courage. He wanted to scream. He wanted to punch something. Instead, he took a deep breath and rejoined his girls on the couch, sliding between them and pretending everything was fine, that his world wasn't falling apart piece by piece. That night, after the girls were asleep, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and did something he'd been avoiding. He read the comments, all of them, the good, the bad, the ugly, the outright vicious. This man is a saint. This man is a fraud. Those girls are heroes. Those girls are being exploited. I wish more people were like the Ward family. I wish people like the Ward family would stop attention-seeking. The comments went on, thousands of them, everyone with an opinion about people they'd never met, a situation they'd never experienced, a choice they'd never had to make. But then Ethan saw something that made him pause. A comment from someone with the username @MikeSullivanNYC. I was the paramedic on scene last night. What this family did was extraordinary. The victim was minutes from death. Without their intervention, I'd be writing a very different kind of report today. To everyone judging, shame on you. Another comment from @RNJessica. I'm a trauma nurse. I've seen trained professionals freeze in situations like this. These children showed more courage and composure than most adults ever will. And another, @Dr. Patel cardiologist here. This wasn't reckless. This was life-saving. Every second counted, and this father made the right call, bringing all available hands to help, even small ones. There were more like these, scattered among the vitriol. Doctors, nurses, first responders, people who actually understood trauma and emergency response, defending Ethan's actions. It wasn't much, but it was something. Ethan was about to close the laptop when a new notification popped up, a friend request on Facebook from someone named Margaret Avery. The profile picture showed an elegant older woman with silver hair and kind eyes. Ethan almost ignored it. He'd gotten dozens of friend requests from strangers today, but something made him click on it. The message attached to the request read, Mr. Ward, you don't know me, but you saved my husband's life last night. His name is Charles Avery. He's in surgery now, but the doctors say he's going to survive because of you and your daughters. I don't have adequate words to thank you. If there's anything I can do, anything at all, please let me know. With eternal gratitude, Margaret. Ethan read the message 3 times, his vision blurring with tears. Charles had survived the night. He'd made it to surgery. He was going to live. Ethan typed back with shaking hands. Mrs. Avery, I'm so glad your husband is okay. That's all the thanks we need. Please tell him we're thinking of him and wishing him a full recovery. Take care, Ethan Ward. He hit send and closed the laptop. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the CPS visit, more scrutiny, more judgment. But tonight, knowing that Charles was alive, made it all bearable. Ethan went to check on his daughters one more time before bed. They were tangled together in Grace's bed, having given up on sleeping separately. Lucy clutched Mr. Buttons. Grace had her arm thrown protectively over her sister. Their faces were peaceful in sleep, innocent despite everything. Ethan kissed each of their foreheads and whispered, I love you both more than anything in this world. Then he went to his own room, pulled out Sarah's handkerchief, and allowed himself 5 minutes to cry for the unfairness of it all. 5 minutes to be weak and scared and overwhelmed. When the 5 minutes were up, he dried his eyes and went to bed. Tomorrow he would be strong again. Tomorrow he would face whatever came with his head high and his daughters protected. Tomorrow he would prove that doing the right thing wasn't a mistake, no matter what the world said. But tonight, in the dark quiet of his bedroom, Ethan Ward was just a man who missed his wife, worried about his children, and wondered how saving a life had somehow become a crime in the court of public opinion. He fell asleep with his phone in his hand and woke 3 hours later to another notification. The GoFundMe, the one he hadn't authorized, had been taken down. But someone had started another one, this time with a video message from one of the paramedics confirming that Ethan's actions had indeed saved Charles's life. This one was clearly labeled as unauthorized but supportive, with all proceeds to be donated to a children's hospital if Ethan refused them. It had already raised $60,000. Ethan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He did neither, just stared at the ceiling until dawn crept through his windows, bringing with it a new day and new battles to fight. The morning brought an unexpected visitor. Ethan was making breakfast when he heard a car pull up outside. He glanced out the window and saw a police cruiser. His stomach dropped, but then he recognized the officer climbing out. It was the same woman who'd taken his statement last night. She knocked on the door, and Ethan answered it with Grace and Lucy peering around his legs. "Officer." Ethan realized he didn't know her name. "Ramirez," she supplied. "Sarah Ramirez. May I come in?" Ethan hesitated, then stepped aside. Grace pulled Lucy back to give the officer room. Officer Ramirez looked around the modest living room, clean but worn, furnished with secondhand couches and a coffee table held together with wood glue. Her gaze lingered on the photos on the wall. Ethan and Sarah on their wedding day, the girls as babies, family moments frozen in time. "Mr. Ward, I'm not here officially," she said. "I wanted to check on you and your daughters after everything that's happened." "We're managing," Ethan said carefully. "I've been a cop for 20 years, Ramirez continued. "I've seen a lot of accidents, a lot of people refusing to get involved. What you did last night was remarkable. All three of you." She looked at Grace and Lucy. "You should be proud." "Thank you," Grace said quietly. Ramirez turned back to Ethan. "I also wanted to warn you. The media circus is going to get worse before it gets better. Some of my colleagues are fielding calls from people demanding we investigate you for child endangerment." "CPS is already coming this afternoon," Ethan admitted. "I know. And for what it's worth, I filed a very detailed report making it clear that your actions were appropriate and necessary. I also included statements from the paramedics and—" She paused, seeming to weigh her words. "And from Mr. Avery's legal team." "His legal team contacted you?" "They've been very thorough. They want to make sure you're protected from any fallout." Ramirez pulled a business card from her pocket. "This is the number for Mr. Avery's head of security. He asked me to give it to you. If you're harassed by media or anyone else, call him." Ethan took the card, overwhelmed. "I don't understand. We were just helping." "I know, but apparently Mr. Avery is a very influential man, and he takes care of people who take care of him." Ramirez smiled slightly. "Between you and me, I think you're about to find out that doing the right thing sometimes does pay off." After she left, Ethan stared at the business card. Marcus Webb, Director of Security, Avery Holdings. The number beneath was printed in raised lettering, the card itself made of some expensive-feeling material. "Who's Mr. Avery?" Lucy asked. "The man we helped, baby. His first name is Charles, remember? And he has security people?" Grace's eyes were wide. "Apparently." The morning continued its surreal trajectory. Ethan decided to keep the girls home from school. He couldn't bear to send them back to face more judgment and questions. Instead, they made cookies together, played board games, tried to reclaim some sense of normalcy. At noon, Ethan's phone rang with yet another unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Ward? This is Marcus Webb. Officer Ramirez gave you my card?" The voice was deep, authoritative, the kind that expected to be obeyed. "Yes, she did." "Good. I'm calling to inform you that Mr. Avery has asked me to ensure your family's privacy and safety during this difficult time. We've already had our legal team send cease and desist letters to several media outlets and taken down the unauthorized fundraising pages." Thank you, but that's not necessary." Mr. Avery feels it is very necessary. You saved his life, Mr. Ward. He takes that seriously. Webb paused. I understand Child Services is visiting you today? How did you know that? It's my job to know things. Our legal team has prepared documentation from the paramedics, emergency room doctors, and trauma specialists, all stating that your actions were medically appropriate and likely life-saving. They've already forwarded this to CPS. The visit today should be a formality. Ethan sat down heavily on the couch. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything. Just know that you have support. And Mr. Ward? Mr. Avery is expected to wake from sedation this afternoon. He's been asking about you and your daughters. He'd very much like to thank you personally once he's recovered enough. Tell him we're just glad he's okay. I will. But I suspect he'll want to tell you himself. The call ended, leaving Ethan staring at his phone in disbelief. This was really happening. Charles wasn't just grateful, he was mobilizing resources to protect them. At 2 o'clock sharp, a car pulled up outside. Not an official vehicle, just a plain sedan. A woman in her 50s climbed out, carrying a briefcase. Linda Martinez, presumably. Ethan opened the door before she could knock. Miss Martinez, Mr. Ward. Her expression was neutral, professional. May I come in? The next hour was one of the most excruciating of Ethan's life. Martinez walked through every room of the house, taking notes. She interviewed Grace and Lucy separately, asking them questions about their home life, their father, the events of last night. The girls handled it with remarkable composure, but Ethan could see the fear in their eyes. Finally, Martinez sat down with Ethan at the kitchen table. Mr. Ward, I've reviewed the documentation sent by Mr. Avery's legal team. I've also spoken with your daughters and toured your home. Everything I've seen indicates a loving, stable environment. Ethan's shoulders sagged with relief. However, Martinez continued, and Ethan's relief evaporated. I do have concerns about your judgment in bringing the children into a potentially dangerous situation. The situation was already dangerous, Ethan said quietly. A man was dying. Every second counted. My daughters knew what to do, stayed calm, and helped save his life. Yes, I understand that. But as a parent, your first responsibility is to your children's safety. And I kept them safe while teaching them compassion and courage. Would you rather I had taught them to walk past someone in need? Martinez studied him for a long moment. What you did was... She paused, seeming to struggle with her words. It was complicated, Mr. Ward. It's not a situation covered in any parenting manual. But you're not going to take my girls away. It wasn't a question, but Martinez answered anyway. No, I'm not. But I'm going to recommend that you attend a parenting class focused on risk assessment and emergency situations. Fine. Whatever you need. Martinez gathered her papers and stood. At the door, she paused. Off the record, Mr. Ward? What you taught your daughters last night, that's the kind of lesson that shapes character. My report will reflect that while your methods were unconventional, your intentions were pure and the outcome was undeniably positive. She smiled slightly. But on the record, please be more careful in the future. After she left, Ethan pulled his daughters into a hug so tight they squeaked in protest. It's over? Grace asked. It's over, Ethan confirmed. She's not taking you anywhere. You're stuck with me. Good, Lucy said firmly, because we belong together. That evening, Ethan's phone rang once more. This time, he recognized the number from earlier, Marcus Webb. Mr. Ward, Miss Avery is awake and lucid. He's asking if you and your daughters could visit him tomorrow at St. Catherine's Hospital, room 412. He's quite insistent. Ethan looked at his girls, curled up on the couch watching cartoons, trying to be normal kids after a very abnormal few days. We'll be there, Ethan said, because if Charles wanted to thank them, the least they could do was let him. And maybe, just maybe, meeting the man they'd saved would help his daughters understand that despite all the ugliness, they'd done something beautiful. Tomorrow would bring answers. Tomorrow they would see Charles. Tomorrow, perhaps, the story that had started with rain and blood and terror would find its next chapter. But tonight, they were together, they were safe, and they were still a family. And that, Ethan thought as he watched his daughters laugh at the cartoon, was everything that mattered. St. Catherine's Hospital rose against the morning sky like a monument to hope and healing, its glass and steel facade reflecting clouds that had finally broken apart after days of rain. Ethan pulled his truck into the visitor parking lot, his hands tight on the wheel, and glanced at his daughters in the rearview mirror. Grace sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, wearing the nicest dress she owned, a blue one with white flowers that Sarah had bought her 2 birthdays ago. Lucy fidgeted with Mr. Buttons, who she'd insisted on bringing despite Ethan's gentle suggestion to leave him home. "What if he doesn't remember us?" Lucy asked suddenly, her voice small. Ethan turned in his seat to face her. "He remembers, baby. That's why he asked us to come." "But what if he's different? What if he's not nice?" Grace reached over and took her sister's hand. "He said our names, remember? In the rain. He talked to you about Mr. Buttons. People don't forget things like that." Ethan felt a surge of pride for his eldest daughter, always the protector, always finding the right words when he struggled to. He climbed out and opened the back door, helping both girls down from the high cab. Lucy clutched Mr. Buttons with one hand and reached for Ethan's with the other. The hospital lobby was bustling with activity, doctors in white coats, nurses in colorful scrubs, visitors carrying flowers and balloons. A volunteer at the information desk directed them to the elevators with a warm smile. As they rode up to the 4th floor, Ethan's stomach twisted with nerves. What would they find when they walked into room 412? Would Charles truly be grateful, or had Marcus Webb oversold his employer's desire to meet them? The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. The 4th floor was quieter, more refined than the busy lobby. The floors gleamed, the walls were painted in soothing blues and grays, and the lighting was soft. This wasn't the regular hospital wing. This was where money bought privacy and comfort alongside medical care. Room 412 was at the end of the hall. Outside the door stood a man in a dark suit who could only be security, broad-shouldered, alert, with an earpiece visible. He nodded at Ethan as they approached. "Mr. Ward? The girls? Mr. Avery is expecting you. I'm Marcus Webb. We spoke on the phone." Marcus Webb was not what Ethan expected. Despite the imposing voice, he was average height with kind eyes and a handshake that was firm but not crushing. He looked at Grace and Lucy with something like approval. "He's been asking about you 3 every hour," Marcus said quietly. "Fair warning, he's emotional. The man doesn't cry easily, but he teared up twice this morning just talking about what you did." Ethan swallowed hard. Is he going to be okay?" "Doctors say full recovery, thanks to you. The internal bleeding would have killed him within 20 minutes if you hadn't stopped it." Marcus opened the door. "Go on. He's been waiting." The hospital room was spacious, more like a hotel suite than a medical facility. Large windows overlooked the city, morning light streaming in. Medical equipment beeped softly in the background, but the room had been made as comfortable as possible with real furniture, fresh flowers, and artwork on the walls. In the bed, propped up with pillows, sat Charles Avery. His silver hair was neatly combed, his face was pale, but his eyes were sharp and clear. Bandages wrapped around his head and his torso, IV lines ran to his arm, but he was sitting up and alert. When he saw them enter, his entire face transformed. "You came," he said, and his voice cracked with emotion. "I wasn't sure you would." Lucy let go of Ethan's hand and walked straight to the bedside, Mr. Buttons still clutched in her arms. "Hi, Charles. You look better." Charles laughed and then winced, pressing a hand to his side. "Much better than the last time you saw me, I hope, though the bar was rather low." Grace hung back slightly, uncertain, but Charles extended his hand toward her. "Grace, isn't it? The one who brought the first aid supplies?" "Yes, sir," Grace said quietly, stepping forward to shake his hand. "No sirs here. I'm Charles. Just Charles." He looked at Ethan, and tears filled his eyes. "And you're Ethan, the man who tore off his shirt and refused to let me die." Ethan felt his own throat tighten. "I'm glad you're okay." "Okay? Mr. Ward, Ethan, I'm alive because of you, because you stopped when no one else would, because you brought your daughters into the rain and the blood and the chaos and taught them what it means to be human." Charles's voice shook. "Do you have any idea what that means to me? We just did what anyone should have done. But anyone didn't do it. Charles's voice rose, passionate. I lay there dying while people filmed me like I was entertainment. 7 people, Ethan. 7 people stood safely under that awning and watched me bleed. But you? You risked everything. You put your hands in my wounds. You had your daughters comfort me in what could have been my final moments. He looked at Lucy. You held my hand and told me about Mr. Buttons. Do you know what that meant to a terrified old man? Lucy's eyes filled with tears. You were scared? Petrified. But you made me feel less alone. You made me want to fight to stay alive, because if little girls that brave existed in the world, then the world was worth staying in. A woman entered from an adjoining room, elegant, silver-haired, her eyes red from crying. This had to be Margaret, the woman who'd sent the Facebook message. Margaret, Charles said, reaching for her hand. Come meet them. Come meet the angels who saved me. Margaret Avery moved with the grace of someone accustomed to formal events in high society, but the moment she saw Ethan and his daughters, all pretense fell away. She pressed her hands to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she whispered. I promised myself I wouldn't cry, but… She couldn't finish. Instead, she pulled Lucy into a gentle hug, then Grace, then stood before Ethan with her hands on his shoulders. Thank you. Thank you for giving me more time with him. Mrs. Avery. Margaret, please. Margaret, we're just grateful he's okay. Just grateful, Charles repeated with a slight smile. As if that's a small thing. Ethan, I need you to understand something. I'm 63 years old. I've built companies, made fortunes, met presidents and kings. None of that matters. None of that means anything compared to what you gave me. More life. More time with my wife, my children, my grandchildren. You gave me everything. He reached for something on the bedside table, an envelope, thick and cream-colored. His hands shook slightly as he held it out to Ethan. Please, take this. Ethan didn't move. Charles, we didn't help you for money. I know that. That's precisely why I want you to have it. Charles's voice was gentle but firm. Please, open it. Ethan took the envelope with reluctance. Inside was a check. He looked at the amount and nearly dropped it. $50,000. I can't accept this, Ethan said immediately, trying to hand it back. You can and you will, Charles said, because this isn't charity, Ethan. This is gratitude. This is me trying, inadequately, to express what your courage means to me. But it's too much. Too much? Charles's laugh was bitter. Too much? Ethan, I would have paid every penny I own for another day of life. $50,000 is nothing. It's an insult, frankly, but Margaret convinced me that offering more might offend you. Margaret nodded. We wanted to give you $1 million, but Marcus advised us to start smaller. Ethan felt dizzy. $1 million. They'd considered giving him $1 million. I have a good job, he managed. I provide for my girls. I know you do. Marcus's background check was very thorough. You ran a background check on me? Charles had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. Forgive me. Old habits. When you build the kind of businesses I've built, you learn to be cautious, but what I learned about you only deepened my gratitude. He looked at Grace and Lucy. Single father for 3 years. Wife died of cancer, working double shifts to keep your family afloat. Never missed a rent payment. Never let your daughters go without. Somehow always finding money for school supplies and birthday presents, even when it meant you went hungry. His voice broke. You're a good man, Ethan Ward, the kind of man this world needs more of. How do you know all that? Ethan asked, feeling exposed. Because I needed to understand the man who saved me. And what I learned, Charles paused, gathering himself. What I learned is that you reminded me of someone I lost a long time ago. The room fell silent except for the soft beeping of monitors. Margaret placed her hand on her husband's shoulder, a gesture of support. Your brother, Charles said quietly. Daniel Ward. He worked for me 15 years ago. Ethan's world tilted. You knew Daniel. Knew him. Ethan, he built my first company with me. We started Avery Holdings together, his financial genius and my capital. He was more than an employee. He was my friend, my partner. And when he died, Charles's voice broke completely. When he died, a part of me died with him. Ethan couldn't speak. He'd known Daniel had worked in finance, had been successful, but he'd never known the details. After Daniel died, it had been too painful to dig into his life, to see all the things he'd accomplished that Ethan never would. Daniel talked about you constantly, Charles continued. His little brother, the mechanic with the biggest heart. He was so proud of you, Ethan. He said you understood people in a way he never could, that you had the courage to care when caring was hard. Tears streamed down Ethan's face now, and he didn't bother wiping them away. He never told me he worked with you. He wanted to. He was planning to bring you into the business, actually. He said you were wasted fixing cars, that your real gift was understanding what people needed and finding ways to give it to them. Charles leaned forward, intense despite his injuries. And then I saw you in that rain, and it was like Daniel was there again, the same selflessness, the same refusal to look away from suffering. You're your brother's brother, Ethan, and helping you, helping your daughters, it's the least I can do to honor his memory. Grace tugged on Ethan's sleeve. Daddy, you never told us Uncle Daniel knew Mr. Charles. I didn't know, baby. Lucy looked at Charles with her head tilted. Did Uncle Daniel have a teddy bear too? The question was so innocent, so perfectly Lucy, that it broke the tension. Charles laughed through his tears. He did, actually, a ridiculous thing called Professor Snuggles. He kept it in his office, said it helped him think through complex problems. See? Lucy said to Ethan triumphantly. Uncle Daniel was never too old for teddy bears. Margaret wiped her eyes and smiled. Your daughters are remarkable, Ethan. Truly remarkable. They are, Ethan agreed, pulling both girls close. They're everything good that Sarah and I ever did. Sarah, Charles repeated, your wife. I'm sorry I never got to meet her. She would have liked you, Ethan said. She always said Daniel's boss must be special because Daniel never spoke badly of work. He loved what he did. The feeling was mutual. Daniel made coming to work a joy. Charles looked at the check still in Ethan's hand. Please take it. Not as payment. You can't pay someone for saving your life. Take it as a gift from one family to another. Use it to make things easier for these incredible girls. Pay off debts, fix your truck, take a vacation, whatever you need. Ethan looked at the check, at his daughters, at Charles and Margaret watching him with such hope in their eyes. $50,000. It was more money than he'd ever held at once. It could change their lives, catch up on bills, fix the roof, maybe even start a college fund for the girls. But taking it felt wrong somehow, like he was profiting from what should have been a simple act of decency. Charles, he started, but Charles held up a hand. Let me tell you something about your brother. When Avery Holdings took off, Daniel made millions. Do you know what he did with that money? He donated most of it, built schools, funded scholarships, supported shelters. He said money was worthless if it just sat in a bank. He said the only point of having resources was to help people who needed them. That sounds like Daniel, Ethan admitted. So take the check. Not for you, for your daughters. Give them opportunities. Let them dream bigger than they could before. That's what Daniel would have wanted. That's what I want. Charles's eyes were pleading now. Please, Ethan, let me do this. Let me honor Daniel's memory by helping his brother. Let me repay a debt that can never truly be repaid. Ethan looked at Grace and Lucy. Grace's eyes were wide, understanding that something important was happening even if she didn't grasp all the details. Lucy was studying Charles with that peculiar intensity she sometimes got, like she could see into people's hearts. Okay, Ethan finally said. Okay, we'll accept it. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Margaret. Margaret clasped her hands together, fresh tears falling. Thank you. You've given us our miracle. Let us give you yours. Charles sagged back against his pillows, relief washing over his face. There's more I want to discuss, but the doctors are limiting my time with visitors. Marcus will coordinate everything, getting the check deposited, handling any media that won't leave you alone, making sure you're protected from the ugliness that's been happening online. You know about that? Ethan asked. Know about it? Ethan, I've had my legal team working overtime to combat it. We've shut down fake fundraising pages, sent cease and desist letters to outlets spreading lies about you, and compiled evidence to sue several individuals for defamation if necessary. You don't have to do that. Yes, I do. You saved my life, and people responded by trying to destroy yours. That's unacceptable. Charles's voice hardened, showing a glimpse of the businessman he must be. No one hurts my family, and Ethan, whether you like it or not, you and your daughters are family now. Lucy stepped forward and carefully placed Mr. Buttons on Charles's bed. You can borrow him for a little while. He makes people feel better when they're hurt. Charles picked up the worn teddy bear with trembling hands, holding it like it was made of glass. Lucy, I can't. Just for a while, Lucy insisted. Until you go home. Then you can give him back. Charles pressed Mr. Buttons to his chest, and when he looked at Lucy, his face was full of wonder. Thank you, sweetheart. I'll take very good care of him. A nurse entered, clipboard in hand. I'm sorry, but Mr. Avery needs to rest now. Doctor's orders. They said their goodbyes, Grace and Lucy each hugging Charles gently, mindful of his injuries. Margaret walked them to the door, pressing a business card into Ethan's hand. My personal number, she said. Call any time for anything. You're part of our lives now, Ethan. We mean that. In the hallway, Marcus Webb was waiting. He handed Ethan another card. My number. Use it. We have a security team monitoring social media for threats against your family. If anyone approaches you, calls you, anything that feels wrong, you contact me immediately. Understood? Ethan nodded, overwhelmed. And Ethan? Marcus's expression softened slightly. What you did that night. I'm former military. I've seen combat. What you did took a different kind of courage, the kind that's harder to find. You should be proud. The drive home was quiet. Grace and Lucy seemed lost in thought, processing everything they'd seen and heard. Ethan's mind spun with revelations. Daniel had worked with Charles, had been successful beyond anything Ethan had imagined, had been planning to bring Ethan into the business before his death. How different would their lives have been if Daniel had lived? Would Sarah have gotten better treatment? Would they have caught her cancer earlier? But dwelling on what-ifs was poison. Ethan had learned that the hard way. Daddy, Grace's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Is $50,000 a lot? Yes, baby, it's a lot. What are we going to do with it? Ethan considered the question. What do you think we should do with it? Lucy piped up from the back seat. We should save some for college. That's what Mommy always said. Save for college. And fix the roof, Grace added. It leaks in my room when it rains hard. And maybe get a new truck? Lucy suggested hopefully. One that doesn't make scary noises? Ethan laughed, the first genuine laugh he'd felt in days. Yes to all of those things. We'll be smart about it. Make it last. Make it count. When they pulled up to their house, Ethan noticed something odd. Their lawn, which had been brown and patchy, was now professionally landscaped with fresh sod and flowering bushes. The paint on their front porch, which had been peeling, was fresh and white. The mailbox, which had been bent and rusted, was new and straight. What happened to our house? Grace breathed. Ethan climbed out slowly, looking around in disbelief. A man in work clothes was loading tools into a truck parked on the street. He waved when he saw Ethan. Mr. Ward? I'm Jeff from Prestige Property Services. Mr. Avery hired us to take care of some maintenance while you were out. Hope you don't mind. We have a key from the landlord. You were inside my house? Ethan's protective instincts flared. Just the maintenance crew, fixing the roof, replacing the water heater, updating the electrical in the kitchen. Mr. Avery was very specific about what needed doing, said to make sure everything was safe and functional for your family. Ethan walked to the front door in a daze. Inside, the house smelled of fresh paint and new carpet. The crack in the living room ceiling was gone. The kitchen faucet that had dripped for months was new and gleaming. In the girls' bedroom, the water stain from the roof leak had been painted over, and there were new curtains on the windows. This is too much, Ethan whispered. But Grace and Lucy were delighted, running from room to room discovering improvements. Lucy squealed when she found that her closet door, which had stuck for years, now opened smoothly. Grace nearly cried when she realized her drafty bedroom window had been replaced. Ethan's phone rang. Marcus Webb. Did the crew finish? Marcus asked without preamble. Marcus, you can't just... Charles wanted it done. The man is lying in a hospital bed feeling guilty that you've been struggling while he's been living in luxury. Let him do this, Ethan. It makes him feel better. But breaking into my house, we didn't break in. We got permission from your landlord and left everything better than we found it. No harm, no foul. Marcus paused. Listen, Ethan, Charles Avery is not a man who does things halfway. When he decides to help someone, he helps completely. You can either fight it every step of the way, or you can accept that sometimes good things happen to good people. Your choice. Ethan looked at his daughters, at their joy over simple repairs that he should have been able to provide himself but couldn't afford. Pride warred with gratitude, but watching Lucy dance in a room that no longer had a leaky ceiling, gratitude won. Thank you, Ethan said quietly. Tell Charles thank you. Tell him yourself he wants you to come back tomorrow. Says he has more to discuss. More? What more could there be? You'll see, Marcus said, and there was a smile in his voice. Trust me, Ethan, the best is yet to come. That afternoon, while the girls played in their improved bedrooms, Ethan sat at the kitchen table and deposited the check using his phone's banking app. He watched the numbers in his account change, from $347 to $50,347. It didn't seem real. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Ward, this is Tom Chen, producer for Good Morning America. We'd love to fly you and your daughters to New York for an interview. All expenses paid plus a $10,000 appearance fee. Interested? Another text. Ethan, this is Jessica Kim from The Today Show. We're doing a segment on everyday heroes and would love to feature your story. Can we talk? The offers kept coming. Interview requests, appearance fees, book deals, movie rights. The world that had been so quick to judge now wanted to profit from their story. Ethan deleted the messages without responding. Their story wasn't for sale. Instead, he called his sister Rachel, who he'd been avoiding since this whole thing started. Ethan, finally! I've been trying to reach you for days. Rachel's voice was a mix of relief and frustration. I know. I'm sorry. It's been crazy. Crazy? Try insane. You're all over the news. There are articles about you in every paper, and you're not answering your phone. I met him today, Charles Avery, the man we saved. Rachel was quiet for a moment. And he knew Daniel, Rachel. They worked together, built a company together. What? How did we not know this? I don't know. Maybe Daniel was planning to tell us. Maybe he was waiting for the right time. Ethan's voice broke. He's gone, and I'll never get to ask him. Oh, Ethan, Rachel's voice softened. I'm sorry, I know you miss him. Every day. But Rachel, Charles gave us money. A lot of money. And he fixed our house, and he wants to help us more. He says we're family now. Is he safe? I mean, is this legitimate? I think so. Marcus Webb, his head of security, he's former military, very professional. And Charles, he's grateful, almost overwhelmingly so. Well, if Daniel trusted him, that says something. Daniel was always a good judge of character. They talked for another hour, Rachel filling him in on family news, normal things that felt like a balm after days of chaos. When they hung up, Ethan felt more grounded, more like himself. That evening, Ethan made a special dinner, steak, which they rarely could afford, and baked potatoes and salad. They ate at their small kitchen table, laughing and talking about everything except the past few days. It felt normal. It felt right. After dinner, while Grace helped Lucy with homework, Ethan pulled out Sarah's old journal, the one she'd kept during her cancer treatment. He didn't open it often because it hurt too much, but tonight he needed to hear her voice. He flipped to a random page and read, Ethan is the strongest person I know, even though he doesn't believe it. He thinks strength is about muscles and fixing things, but real strength is about heart. It's about showing up every day and choosing love even when love is hard. Our girls are so lucky to have him. I just wish I could stay long enough to see them grow up, to see Ethan become the amazing father I know he'll be. Ethan closed the journal with shaking hands. I hope I'm making you proud, Sarah, he whispered into the empty kitchen. I hope I'm being the father you believed I could be. That night, he tucked the girls into their beds. Grace in her newly repaired room, Lucy surrounded by her stuffed animals, missing only Mr. Buttons who was keeping Charles company. Daddy, Grace said as he was about to leave, is our life going to be different now? Ethan sat on the edge of her bed. Maybe, in some ways, but the important things, us, our family, who we are, That won't change. We're still wards. We still help people. We still take care of each other. Promise? Promise. In Lucy's room, the 7-year-old was fighting sleep, her eyes drooping but determined to stay open. Daddy, do you think Mr. Buttons is helping Charles feel better? I think Mr. Buttons is doing an excellent job. Good. Because Charles needs him right now. We can share. Ethan kissed her forehead. You have the biggest heart, Lucy girl. I learned it from you, Daddy. After the girls were asleep, Ethan stood in the hallway between their rooms and allowed himself to feel it, all of it. The terror of that night on the highway, the pain of being judged and accused, the overwhelming gratitude Charles and Margaret had shown, the ghost of his brother suddenly present again after years of absence, the weight of $50,000 and the responsibility that came with it. He thought about Daniel, about the life his brother had built that Ethan had known nothing about. He thought about Sarah, about what she would say if she were here. And he thought about his daughters, sleeping peacefully in rooms that no longer leaked or creaked, protected by money they'd never had before. Their futures suddenly brighter than they'd been in years. Tomorrow, they would return to the hospital. Tomorrow, Charles would reveal whatever else he wanted to discuss. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new changes, new opportunities that Ethan couldn't yet imagine. But tonight, in this moment, standing in the hallway of their small repaired house, Ethan Ward felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. Not the desperate hope of someone barely surviving, but the solid hope of someone who'd been thrown a lifeline and was strong enough to hold on. He went to bed with Sarah's handkerchief under his pillow and Daniel's memory in his heart, ready to face whatever tomorrow would bring. Because that's what wards did. They faced things head on, they helped people who needed it, and they never, ever gave up. And if the past few days had taught him anything, it was that sometimes, just sometimes, doing the right thing did pay off. Not in the ways you expected, and never without a cost, but in ways that mattered more than money or fame or public opinion. It paid off in the quiet satisfaction of knowing you'd saved a life, in the pride of teaching your daughters courage, in the unexpected gift of connection with someone who'd known and loved your brother, in the simple, profound truth that kindness, real kindness, echoed out into the world in ways you couldn't predict or control. Ethan fell asleep with a smile on his face, dreaming of rain and blood transformed into flowers and sunshine, of endings that became beginnings, of losses that somehow, impossibly, led to finding things you didn't know you'd been looking for all along. The morning sun painted golden stripes across Ethan's bedroom floor when his phone rang, pulling him from the first truly restful sleep he'd had in a week. He squinted at the screen. Marcus Webb. It was barely 7 in the morning. Marcus? Ethan's voice was rough with sleep. Morning, Ethan. Charles is asking for you. He had a good night, vitals are strong, and the doctors say he's healing faster than expected. He's convinced it's because of Mr. Buttons. There was warmth in Marcus's typically professional tone. Can you come by around 10? He has something important to discuss with you. Ethan rubbed his eyes, processing. The girls have school. Bring them. Charles specifically asked for all 3 of you. I'll clear it with their principal if you'd like. You can do that? Ethan, I can do a lot of things. One of the perks of working for a man like Charles Avery. Marcus paused. He's excited about something. I haven't seen him this animated in years, even with cracked ribs and a concussion. Whatever he wants to talk about, it's big. After Marcus hung up, Ethan lay in bed for a moment, staring at the ceiling. The weight of yesterday still pressed on him. The check, the revelation about Daniel, the house repairs, the overwhelming generosity from people he barely knew. It felt like standing on shifting ground, never quite sure where solid footing would be. He made breakfast while the girls got ready. Pancakes with chocolate chips, another thing they could now afford without counting pennies. Grace came down first, already dressed in jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She'd always been mature for her age, but something about the past week had aged her further. She moved through the kitchen with quiet efficiency, setting the table without being asked. We're going back to the hospital today, Ethan said, flipping a pancake. Grace looked up, her expression unreadable. Is Charles okay? He's doing well. He wants to talk to us about something. About what? I don't know, baby, but Marcus said it was important. Lucy bounded down the stairs moments later, Mr. Buttons's absence clearly bothering her. She'd slept with that bear every night since Sarah died, and the empty space in her arms looked wrong. "Is Mr. Buttons okay?" she asked immediately. "I'm sure he's fine. We'll see him today." "Good. I miss him." Lucy climbed into her chair and studied her father with those two wise eyes. "Daddy, are you scared?" "Scared of what, sweetheart?" "Of what Mr. Charles wants to talk about. You look scared." Ethan set the plate of pancakes on the table and sat down. He'd never been able to lie to his daughters, even when the truth was complicated. "A little bit," he admitted. "Sometimes when good things happen, it's scarier than when bad things happen, because you start worrying about when the good things will end." "But good things don't have to end," Lucy said with the absolute certainty of a 7-year-old. "Sometimes they just keep getting better." Grace reached across the table and squeezed Ethan's hand. "We're in this together, Daddy. Whatever happens, we're a team." Ethan's throat tightened. "Yeah, baby, we're a team." They ate breakfast in comfortable silence, punctuated by Lucy's commentary about everything from the perfectly round chocolate chips to the bird she could see through the window. Normal moments, precious moments, the kind Ethan had learned not to take for granted. At 9:30, they piled into the truck, which made less scary noises now after Marcus had apparently sent a mechanic to service it. Another small kindness that Ethan hadn't asked for, but couldn't quite bring himself to refuse. The morning was clear and bright, the storms of the past week finally giving way to the kind of autumn weather that made everything feel possible. St. Catherine's Hospital looked different in daylight, less imposing and more welcoming. The parking lot was busier, filled with visitors carrying flowers and balloons. Ethan found a spot near the back and they walked together toward the entrance, Lucy skipping slightly, Grace walking with measured steps, Ethan somewhere between the two, uncertain but determined. Marcus met them in the lobby, looking sharp in a dark suit despite the early hour. He shook Ethan's hand and crouched down to the girls' level. "Morning, ladies. Charles is very excited to see you both. Fair warning, there are some other people in the room today. Don't be nervous. They're all friends." "What people?" Ethan asked, his protective instincts flaring. "You'll see. Come on." The elevator ride to the 4th floor felt longer this time. Lucy fidgeted with the hem of her dress. Grace stood perfectly still, but Ethan could see the tension in her shoulders. He wanted to say something reassuring, but his own nerves made words difficult. Room 412's door was open. Voices drifted out, multiple voices, conversation, and laughter. Marcus gestured for them to enter first. The room had been transformed. The medical equipment was still there, but it had been pushed to the sides, making space for several comfortable chairs arranged in a loose circle. Charles sat in the bed, looking significantly better than yesterday. More color in his face, less pain in his movements. Margaret stood beside him, elegant in a cream-colored suit. And there were 3 other people Ethan didn't recognize. "Ethan, girls, come in, come in!" Charles's face lit up. Mr. Buttons sat propped against his pillows, a tiny get-well card tucked into his paw. "Thank you for coming. I have some people I'd like you to meet." The first was a woman in her late 30s with kind eyes and a warm smile. "This is my daughter, Catherine. She flew in from Seattle yesterday." Catherine stepped forward and shook Ethan's hand firmly. "I can't thank you enough for what you did for my father. When I got the call that he'd been in an accident," her voice caught. "I thought I'd lost him." The second person was a man about Ethan's age, tall and athletic with Charles's sharp eyes. "My son, James. He came from Boston." "Sir?" James's handshake was strong, his eyes suspiciously bright. "My kids, your grandkids, Dad, they want to meet the heroes who saved their grandpa. We're planning a family dinner once you're recovered, and you're all invited. No arguments." The third person was unexpected. A young woman, maybe mid-20s, with a professional demeanor and a tablet in her hands. "This is Amanda Chen, my executive assistant, and the person who keeps my entire life organized." Amanda smiled. "Nice to finally meet you in person, Mr. Ward. I've been handling the logistics on our end, the house repairs, the media management, the legal documentation. If you need anything going forward, I'm your point of contact." Ethan felt overwhelmed by the parade of introductions, but Lucy had no such hesitation. She walked straight to Charles and carefully retrieved Mr. Buttons. "I think you're better now," she announced, So Mr. Buttons can come home. Charles laughed, then winced and pressed a hand to his ribs. The doctors agree with you. I'm being discharged tomorrow. But Lucy, I'm going to miss having Mr. Buttons around. He's an excellent listener. You can visit him whenever you want, Lucy said generously. We don't live that far away. Actually, Charles said, and his tone shifted, became more serious, more purposeful. He gestured to the chairs. Please, everyone sit. I have something important I need to discuss with Ethan and the girls. Ethan's stomach clenched. Here it was. Whatever had Marcus so intrigued? He sat down slowly, Grace and Lucy flanking him, the Ward family presenting a united front against whatever was coming. Charles took a deep breath, and Margaret placed her hand over his. Ethan, over the past few days, I've had a lot of time to think. About life, about death, about what matters. And I've realized something. I've spent 40 years building businesses and making money, but I've forgotten what it's all for. I forgot what your brother taught me. What did Daniel teach you? Ethan asked quietly. That wealth without purpose is just numbers on a screen. That the point of success isn't accumulation, it's impact. Charles leaned forward, intense despite his injuries. Daniel and I used to talk about starting a foundation, something that would help people, really help them. Not just write checks, but change lives. We planned it all out, but then he swallowed hard. Then he died, and I couldn't bear to do it without him. I told myself I was too busy. That business came first. But the truth is, I was a coward. I was afraid to build something meaningful because it would remind me of what I'd lost. Catherine placed her hand on her father's shoulder. Dad, let me finish, sweetheart. Charles looked at Ethan with such intensity that Ethan couldn't look away. You reminded me what matters. You, a man who has every reason to be bitter and beaten down by life, stopped on a highway in the rain and saved a stranger. You taught your daughters courage and compassion in a world that too often rewards neither. You're living the life Daniel always said mattered most, a life of character and heart. Charles, I don't understand where this is going. I'm getting to it, Charles smiled. Ethan, I want to start the foundation Daniel and I planned. The Daniel Ward Memorial Foundation focused on helping families in crisis. Single parents, people dealing with medical debt, kids who need opportunities they can't afford. Real help, not just handouts, job training, education funding, medical support, housing assistance. Everything Daniel believed in, everything you embody. That's wonderful, Ethan said slowly. Daniel would have loved that. I want you to run it. The room fell silent. Ethan stared at Charles, certain he'd misheard. I'm sorry, what? I want you to be the executive director of the Daniel Ward Memorial Foundation. Full-time position, competitive salary, benefits, complete creative control over how we help people. You'd work with Amanda and our legal team to set it up. But the vision, the direction, the heart of it, that would be yours. Ethan's mind went blank. Charles, I'm a mechanic. I don't know anything about running a foundation. You know about needing help. You know about struggling to make ends meet while raising children alone. You know about making impossible choices between paying rent and buying medicine. You know about being judged for doing your best. Charles's voice was passionate now, the businessman emerging despite the hospital gown and bandages. Those are exactly the qualifications we need. The business side, the legal side, the logistics. We have people for that. But the soul of this foundation needs to be someone who understands the people we're trying to help. Someone who won't forget that behind every application is a family desperate for a chance. Dad's right, Catherine said. We've talked about this as a family. The foundation will be funded with $50 million initially, with plans to grow it significantly. But money alone won't make it work. It needs someone who cares, really cares about the mission. James nodded. Someone who'll fight for the people who can't fight for themselves. Someone who'll make sure the foundation stays true to its purpose and doesn't become just another bureaucratic charity. Ethan looked at his daughters. Grace's eyes were wide with hope and fear. Lucy looked confused but trusting. This was insane. This was impossible. People like Ethan didn't run multi-million-dollar foundations. People like Ethan fixed cars and struggled to pay rent and did their best to survive. I don't have a college degree, Ethan said. I barely finished high school. I'm not qualified. Daniel didn't care about credentials, Charles interrupted. He cared about character. And Ethan, you have more character in your little finger than most people accumulate in a lifetime. He paused, letting his words settle. Look, I'm not asking you to decide right now. Take time. Think about it. Talk to your daughters. But please, at least consider it. Consider that maybe, just maybe, this is why everything happened the way it did. Maybe you were meant to save my life so I could help you change yours. Margaret spoke for the first time, her voice gentle. We've already set up a trust fund for Grace and Lucy's education. Full ride to any college they want, graduate school if they choose it, no strings attached. That's happening regardless of whether you take this job. But Ethan, think about what you could do for other families. Think about the single parents out there right now, drowning in bills and exhaustion, who just need someone to throw them a lifeline. Like someone threw one to us, Grace said quietly, and everyone turned to look at her. She straightened up, meeting their eyes with a maturity beyond her years. That's what you're saying, right? Mr. Charles is throwing us a lifeline. And if Daddy takes this job, we get to throw lifelines to other people. Exactly, Charles said, smiling at her. That's exactly it, Grace. Lucy tugged on Ethan's sleeve. Daddy, would we still live in our house? That's up to you, Charles said. The salary would be enough to buy a house if you wanted, or you could stay where you are, though I'd suggest buying it from your landlord rather than renting. The foundation office would be downtown, about 20 minutes from where you live now. Normal hours, no weekends unless there's an emergency. We'd structure it so you can still be a dad first and director second. Ethan's head spun. This morning he'd been making pancakes and worrying about grocery money. Now he was being offered a chance to run a foundation with $50 million in funding to honor his brother's memory, to help families like his own. It was too much, too fast, too overwhelming. Can I think about it? He managed. Of course. Take all the time you need. Charles relaxed back against his pillows. But Ethan, I hope you'll say yes. I hope you'll let me do this for Daniel, for you, for all the families out there who need someone like you in their corner. Amanda stepped forward, all business. I've prepared some preliminary documentation, job description, salary information, organizational structure. Nothing you need to sign today, just information to review. She handed Ethan a folder. Take it home, read through it, and we can discuss any questions you have. Ethan took the folder with numb fingers. Inside he could see printed pages, numbers, organizational charts. It looked professional and official and completely foreign to his world of engine grease and hourly wages. James stood up. Ethan, I know this is a lot, but I want you to know that Dad doesn't make offers like this lightly. He's been talking about this foundation for years, but he could never find the right person to run it. Then you came along and reminded him what Daniel always tried to teach him, that the best person for a job isn't always the one with the fanciest resume. It's the one with the right heart. Catherine walked over and crouched in front of Lucy. What do you think, Lucy? Would you like it if your dad helped other kids whose families need help? Lucy considered this seriously. Would we still have time for pancake breakfasts? Everyone laughed, the tension breaking slightly. Absolutely, Charles assured her. That's non-negotiable. Pancake breakfasts are mandatory. They spent another hour in that hospital room, talking about everything and nothing. Catherine told stories about Charles as a father, making the imposing billionaire seem human and fallible. James showed Grace and Lucy pictures of his kids, Charles and Margaret's grandchildren, and promised to introduce them soon. Amanda walked Ethan through some basic logistics, careful not to push, but clearly excited about the possibility. Through it all, Ethan felt like he was watching from outside his own body. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like him. Yet here he was, surrounded by wealth and opportunity, being offered a chance to transform not just his life, but the lives of countless others. When it was time to leave, Charles pulled Ethan aside while the girls said goodbye to Margaret. I know you're scared, Charles said quietly. I know this feels impossible. But Ethan, fear of the impossible is just another word for standing on the edge of something great. Daniel used to say that. He'd look at a massive challenge and say, good, that means it's worth doing. What if I fail? Ethan whispered. Then you fail. and we adjust and try again. But Ethan, what if you succeed? What if you take this broken, grieving, beautiful heart of yours and use it to change the world? Charles gripped Ethan's shoulder. You saved my life. Let me help you find yours. The drive home was quiet. Grace stared out the window, lost in thought. Lucy hummed to herself, Mr. Buttons back in her arms where he belonged. Ethan's hands were tight on the wheel, his mind spinning with possibilities and fears in equal measure. Daddy? Grace finally broke the silence. Are you going to do it? I don't know, baby. It's a big decision. But you could help a lot of people. Maybe. Or maybe I'd mess it up and waste Charles's money and fail everyone who was counting on me. Grace turned in her seat to look at him directly. Mommy used to say you were the bravest person she knew. Your mother was biased. No, she wasn't. She said you were brave because you kept going even when things were hard. She said true bravery isn't about not being scared. It's about being scared and doing the thing anyway. Grace's voice was fierce. You taught me and Lucy that on the highway. You were scared, but you helped Charles anyway. This is the same thing, just bigger. Ethan pulled into their driveway and turned off the engine. He sat there for a moment, hands still on the wheel, staring at their small house with its fresh paint and fixed roof. What do you think your Uncle Daniel would say? He asked. I think, Grace said slowly, he'd say that you're exactly the kind of person who should do this, because you understand what it's like to need help. And, Lucy added, he'd probably say something about Professor Snuggles helping you make decisions. Ethan laughed despite himself, imagining his serious, business-minded brother consulting with a stuffed animal. But Grace was right. Daniel had always led with his heart, even in the cutthroat world of finance. That's why people had loved him. That's why Charles still missed him after all these years. Inside, Ethan made lunch while the girls did homework at the kitchen table. He moved through the familiar motions, sandwiches cut diagonally because that's how Lucy liked them, chips arranged on the plate just so. But his mind was miles away. He thought about his life now. The garage, the cars, the barely making ends meet. It was honest work, and he was good at it, but was it enough? Was it what he wanted to be doing for the next 20 years? He thought about Sarah, about the medical bills that had buried them, the treatments they couldn't afford, the experimental options that might have saved her if only they'd had the money. How many other families were facing those same choices right now? How many people needed help that they couldn't find? After lunch, while the girls played in their rooms, Ethan opened the folder Amanda had given him. The job description was detailed. Develop programs to assist families in crisis, oversee grant distributions, work with community partners, manage foundation staff, ensure mission alignment with Daniel's vision. The salary made his head spin, $120,000 a year plus benefits, more than double what he made at the garage. Enough to buy a house, save for the future, give his daughters opportunities he'd never dreamed of. But it wasn't about the money, not really. It was about the mission. It was about taking the worst moments of his life, losing Sarah, struggling to survive, feeling helpless and invisible, and transforming them into something that could help others. It was about making Daniel's dream real, honoring his brother's memory in a way that mattered. Ethan pulled out his phone and called his sister, Rachel. Please tell me you're calling with normal family gossip and not more insane news, Rachel said by way of greeting. I wish. Ethan filled her in on the morning's events, the foundation, the job offer, the impossible decision. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. Holy shit, Ethan. Yeah. Are you going to do it? I don't know. It's crazy, right? Me, running a foundation? No crazier than you saving a billionaire's life on a highway. No crazier than you raising two incredible girls alone. No crazier than any of the impossible things you've been doing for the past 3 years. Rachel's voice softened. Ethan, Daniel would be so proud of you. Not because of the job offer, because of who you are. You're exactly the person who should be doing this. But what if I'm not good enough? Then you'll learn. You'll grow. You'll figure it out the same way you've figured out everything else. Rachel paused. Can I tell you something Mom said once? After Daniel died, she said the worst thing about losing him wasn't the grief. It was knowing all the good he would have done in the world was now left undone. But Ethan, this is a chance to continue his work, to make sure the good he wanted to do gets done. Ethan's eyes burned with tears. I miss him so much, Rachel. I know, we all do. But maybe this is how he comes back to us. Through you, through this foundation, through helping people the way he always wanted to. After they hung up, Ethan sat in the quiet kitchen for a long time. He thought about Daniel, about the brother who'd been so different from him but had loved him fiercely anyway. He thought about Sarah, about how she'd believed in him even when he couldn't believe in himself. He thought about Grace and Lucy, growing up watching their father either play it safe or take a leap of faith. That evening, after dinner, Ethan gathered his daughters in the living room. I need to talk to you both about something important, he said. They settled on either side of him on the couch, instinctively sensing this was serious. This job Charles is offering. If I take it, our lives will change. I'd be working in an office instead of the garage. I'd be helping people instead of fixing cars. We'd have more money, but I'd also have more responsibility and stress. And I need to know how you feel about that. Grace spoke first. Would you be happy? I think so, maybe. I don't know. Would you be helping people like us? People who need help? Yes. Then you should do it. Grace's voice was firm. Because, Daddy, we needed help. We needed money for Mommy's treatments, but we didn't have it. We needed someone to care about us when everything was falling apart, but everyone was too busy. If you can be the person who helps families like ours, then you have to do it. You have to. Lucy climbed into Ethan's lap. And we'd get to help too, right? We'd be part of it? How do you mean, baby? Well, you're doing it because of what we did on the highway, because we helped Charles. So it's kind of our foundation too, in a way. We're a team, remember? Ethan hugged them both tight, these two incredible little girls who'd been through so much and somehow remained kind and brave and full of hope. Yeah, he said, his voice rough with emotion. We're a team. That night, after the girls were asleep, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with Sarah's handkerchief spread before him and his phone in his hand. He stared at Marcus Webb's number for a long time before finally pressing call. Ethan, Marcus answered immediately. I was hoping you'd call. Tell Charles yes, Ethan said. Tell him I'll do it. I'll run the foundation. I'll do my best to honor Daniel's memory and help as many people as I can. He's going to be thrilled. Ethan could hear the smile in Marcus's voice. Welcome to the team, Ethan. This is going to be a meeting. After hanging up, Ethan sat in the dark kitchen and let himself feel it all. The terror and the excitement, the grief and the hope, the weight of impossibility and the thrill of new beginnings. He'd made the decision. Now he had to live with it, grow into it, become the person capable of carrying it out. He pulled out Sarah's journal and opened to a page near the end, written in shaky handwriting during her final days. Ethan, my love, I know you're going to doubt yourself after I'm gone. You're going to think you're not enough, not strong enough, not good enough. But I need you to know something. You are extraordinary. Not because you're perfect, you're not, and that's okay. But because you have the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known. Whatever life brings you, whatever challenges you face, lead with that heart. It won't steer you wrong. Love always, Sarah. Ethan traced the words with his finger, imagining Sarah's hand forming each letter, pouring her love into the page. Lead with that heart. That's what he would do. That's what he had to do. He went to bed that night feeling like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to jump into unknown waters. But this time, unlike so many times before, he wasn't jumping alone. He had his daughters beside him, Charles and his family believing in him, Daniel's memory guiding him, and Sarah's words wrapped around his heart like armor. Tomorrow he would call Dave at the garage and give notice. Tomorrow he would start learning about foundations and nonprofits and grant distribution. Tomorrow he would begin the impossible task of becoming the person Charles believed he could be. But tonight, Ethan Ward was just a father who'd said yes to hope, who'd chosen courage over comfort, who'd decided that maybe, just maybe, the little mechanic from nowhere could change the world after all. Because in the end, that's what love demanded. That's what his brother had taught him. That's what his wife had believed in. And that's what his daughters deserved, a father who was brave enough to try. The morning Ethan walked into Dave's auto repair to give his notice, the familiar smell of motor oil and metal hit him with unexpected nostalgia. He'd worked here for 8 years, longer than anywhere else in his life. The garage had been his refuge after Sarah died, a place where problems had solutions and hard work produced visible results. Leaving felt like closing a chapter he wasn't sure he was ready to finish. Dave was in his office, a cramped space barely big enough for a desk and filing cabinet, going over invoices with reading glasses perched on his nose. He looked up when Ethan knocked, and something in Ethan's expression made him set down his pen. "This is the conversation I've been dreading," Dave said quietly. "You knew?" "Ethan, the whole world knows Charles Avery wants to give you a job. It's been all over the news since yesterday." Dave leaned back in his chair, which creaked in protest. "I'm not going to lie. I'm going to miss you. You're the best mechanic I've got, but I'd be a real bastard if I tried to keep you from something like this." Ethan sat down in the plastic chair across from the desk, the same chair where he'd begged Dave for this job 8 years ago when he was desperate and grieving and barely holding it together. "I'm giving you 2 weeks' notice. I want to finish up my current jobs, make sure everything's squared away." 2 weeks is more than fair, more than I expected, honestly. Dave pulled off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "Can I ask you something? Are you scared?" "Terrified." "Good. That means it matters to you. The day you stop being scared is the day you stop caring." Dave smiled slightly. "Your brother used to say something like that. Daniel, right? He came by once, years ago, checking up on you, made sure I was treating you right. Said his little brother was the best man he knew, and anyone who didn't see that was an idiot." Ethan's throat tightened. "He said that?" "He did. And Ethan, he was right. You're going to be great at this foundation thing. Not because you have all the answers, but because you know what it's like to need help. That's worth more than any business degree." The 2 weeks passed in a blur of final oil changes and brake jobs, mixed with increasingly surreal meetings about the foundation. Amanda coordinated everything with military precision, scheduling sessions with lawyers, accountants, nonprofit consultants, and community organizers. Ethan felt like a student cramming for the most important exam of his life, absorbing information about tax codes and grant structures and program development at a pace that made his head spin. Charles was discharged from the hospital on day 3 of those 2 weeks. Ethan, Grace, and Lucy attended a small welcome home gathering at the Avery estate, a sprawling property that made Ethan's entire house look like a garden shed. But despite the wealth on display, the gathering felt warm and genuine. Charles's grandchildren, 3 kids between ages 5 and 12, immediately adopted Grace and Lucy as honorary cousins, and the 6 of them disappeared into the massive backyard while the adults talked. "I can't thank you enough for saying yes," Charles said, lowering himself carefully into a chair on the patio. His movements were still stiff, but the color had returned to his face. "You've given me something I haven't had in years, purpose." "I think I should be thanking you," Ethan replied. "No, you saved my life, Ethan. You gave me a second chance. This foundation is how I honor that gift." Charles looked out at the children playing, their laughter carrying across the lawn. Daniel believed that people with resources had a responsibility to those without. Not charity, partnership. Helping people help themselves. That's what this foundation will be. Margaret brought out lemonade and cookies, playing the perfect hostess but keeping a watchful eye on her husband. "The office space is ready," she told Ethan. "Top floor of the Riverside building downtown. Beautiful views, plenty of room to grow. Amanda has been setting everything up." "I haven't even officially started yet," Ethan protested. "Details." Charles waved this away. "We're building something important. No point waiting around." Catherine and James joined them, and the conversation shifted to logistics. They'd hired an interim operations manager named Sarah Mitchell, a woman with 20 years of nonprofit experience, who would help Ethan navigate the early months. They'd secured partnerships with 3 major hospitals for medical debt relief, connected with 2 universities for scholarship programs, and identified a local community center that could serve as a satellite office for families needing direct assistance. "We're starting with 3 focus areas," Catherine explained, pulling up documents on her tablet: medical crisis support, single-parent family assistance, and educational opportunities for underserved kids. We can expand later, but Amanda and I thought these aligned best with Uncle Daniel's vision and your experience. Ethan studied the detailed plans, feeling overwhelmed and inadequate. These people were professionals, operating at a level he'd never experienced. What did he know about running programs that would affect hundreds, maybe thousands, of families? "I can see you spiraling," James said with a knowing smile. "That look on your face, Dad had the same one when he started his first company. Imposter syndrome is real, but here's the thing, you're not supposed to know everything. That's why you have a team. Your job is to keep us honest, keep us focused on the mission, make sure we never forget who we're serving." On Ethan's last day at the garage, the guys threw him a small party. Nothing fancy, pizza, beer for those who weren't driving, and a card they'd all signed. Mike, who'd worked at the shop almost as long as Ethan, pulled him aside while the others were arguing about football. "You did it, man," Mike said. "You got out." "I didn't think of it as getting out." "Maybe not, but the rest of us do. How many times have we all said we'd quit, do something different, find something better? But we never do. We just keep showing up, keep breaking our backs, keep barely getting by." Mike smiled, but there was sadness in it. "You're proof it's possible to change your life. Don't forget that." Ethan hugged him, this guy he'd worked alongside for years but barely knew outside these walls. "Thank you, Mike, for everything." That night, lying in bed unable to sleep, Ethan thought about Mike's words. He hadn't set out to change his life. He'd just stopped on a highway in the rain. But somehow that single decision had created a cascade of consequences that led him here, to the edge of something entirely new. His first official day as executive director of the Daniel Ward Memorial Foundation arrived with autumn sunshine and nerves that made Ethan's hand shake as he knotted his tie. He'd bought 3 new ties and 2 suits, his first suits ever, and felt ridiculous in them. Grace had assured him he looked very professional and handsome, while Lucy had simply said he looked weird without grease on him. The Riverside building was everything Margaret had promised, modern glass and steel, with the foundation's office taking up the entire top floor. When Ethan stepped off the elevator, he found Amanda waiting with a smile and a visitor badge. "Welcome to your first day," she said. "Ready for the tour?" The office was sleek and open, with large windows overlooking the city, comfortable furniture, and that new office smell of fresh paint and possibility. There was a reception area, a conference room with a massive table, several smaller offices, and an open workspace with a dozen desks. Ethan's office was in the corner, spacious, with a view that took his breath away, and a desk that looked like it cost more than his truck. "This is too much," Ethan said. "This is exactly right," Amanda countered. "You're the face of this foundation, Ethan. You need space that reflects the importance of the work." She introduced him to the small team they'd already hired. Sarah Mitchell, the operations manager, was a woman in her 50s with warm eyes and an air of calm competence. Marcus Thompson, no relation to Marcus Webb, was a program coordinator in his 30s who'd worked for several major charities. Jenny Liu was their grants manager, young and enthusiastic with a background in social work, and there were 3 administrative assistants who would handle applications, scheduling, and general operations. "This is your team," Amanda said. "More will come as we grow, but these are the people who will help you build this dream." The first week was a whirlwind of orientation and planning. Sarah walked Ethan through every aspect of nonprofit management, patient with his questions and encouraging when he felt overwhelmed. Marcus Thompson showed him how to evaluate grant applications and assess community needs. Jenny explained the legal requirements for charitable giving and tax documentation. Amanda coordinated everything, keeping them on schedule and on mission. But the real work began when the first applications arrived. Ethan sat in his office on a Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks into the job, reading through the stack of requests for help. Each one was a story of struggle. A single mother in Detroit whose son needed surgery she couldn't afford. A father in Oregon who'd lost his job and was about to lose his apartment. A grandmother in Florida raising 3 grandchildren on a fixed income. A family in Texas still drowning in medical debt 3 years after their daughter's cancer treatment. The cancer one hit him hardest. Ethan read the application twice, seeing Sarah in every detail. The initial diagnosis, the treatment plan, the mounting bills, the desperate choices between medicine and rent. The family was asking for $15,000 to clear their debt so they could keep their house. He called Sarah Mitchell into his office. "This one," he said, sliding the application across the desk. "We need to help them immediately." Sarah read it carefully. "We can. Our first round of grants was approved by the board. We have $2 million in funding allocated for medical crisis support this quarter. This fits perfectly. How fast can we move? If you approve it now, I can have funds wired by Monday." "Do it. And Sarah?" Ethan's voice caught. "Can we cover the whole debt? Not just what they're asking for, but everything?" Sarah checked the supporting documents. "Total debt is $32,000. We can absolutely cover that." "Then let's do it. Let's give them what my family never got, a second chance." Over the following weeks, Ethan found his rhythm. He'd arrive at the office at 8, spend the morning reviewing applications with his team, have lunch meetings with community partners, dedicate afternoons to strategic planning and donor relations, and head home in time for dinner with Grace and Lucy. It was demanding but fulfilling in ways the garage had never been. Every grant approved, every family helped, felt like redeeming a small piece of his own past. Charles visited the office regularly, officially as chairman of the board, but really as a mentor and friend. He'd sit in Ethan's office and listen to updates, offering advice when asked, but mostly just expressing pride in what they were building. "We've helped 47 families in 6 weeks, Ethan told him during one visit. Medical debt relief, emergency housing assistance, educational grants, 47 families who were drowning and now have a chance to breathe. "And it's just the beginning," Charles said. "Wait until word spreads. Wait until other donors see what we're doing and want to be part of it." He paused, studying Ethan. "How are you really doing?" Not the professional answer, the real one. Ethan considered the question. "Some days I wake up and can't believe this is my life. Other days I'm terrified I'm going to fail everyone counting on me. But mostly, I feel like I'm finally doing what I was meant to do. Does that sound crazy?" "It sounds like purpose. And Ethan, you should know, I've been approached by 3 other major donors who want to contribute to the foundation. Your story inspired them. The mechanic who saved a life and is now changing hundreds more. It's powerful. We're looking at another $20 million in pledged donations." Ethan's head spun. $20 million? People want to be part of something meaningful. You've given them that opportunity. Well, Charles smiled. "Daniel would be so proud of you. Hell, I'm proud of you." The foundation's success brought unexpected attention. Media outlets that had vilified Ethan weeks earlier now wanted to feature him as an inspiration. He declined most interviews, but Amanda convinced him to do a few strategic ones: local news stations, a nonprofit industry podcast, one carefully controlled segment for a national morning show. During that segment, the interviewer asked him about the night on the highway, the question everyone always wanted answered. "What made you stop when no one else would?" Ethan thought about all the polished answers he could give. Instead, he told the truth. "I stopped because my wife taught me that looking away from suffering doesn't make it go away. It just makes you smaller. I stopped because I wanted my daughters to understand that kindness isn't convenient or safe, but it's necessary. And I stopped because, in that moment, nothing else mattered except that a person needed help." The clip went viral, shared millions of times with comments that finally reflected understanding rather than judgment. The tide of public opinion had fully turned, but Ethan barely noticed. He was too busy working. 3 months into the job, the foundation held its first major fundraising gala. Ethan hated the idea, all that money spent on fancy food and decorations, but Amanda and Catherine convinced him it was necessary for building relationships with major donors. Grace and Lucy attended, wearing new dresses that Margaret had insisted on buying, looking beautiful and slightly overwhelmed by the ballroom full of wealthy strangers. Charles gave a speech that night, standing at the podium in a tuxedo, fully recovered from his injuries. He talked about the accident, about lying on that wet highway certain he was dying, about the mechanic and 2 little girls who refused to let him go. He talked about Daniel and the dreams they'd shared, and then he turned to Ethan, who was seated at the head table trying not to panic. 3 months ago, this foundation was just an idea. Today, it's a reality that's changed the lives of 137 families. Medical debts erased, homes saved, educational dreams funded, futures secured. And it's all because of the man you see here, Ethan Ward, who understands that real wealth isn't what you accumulate, it's what you give away. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to know what a hero looks like, you're looking at him. The applause was deafening. Ethan felt his face burn, uncomfortable with the attention, but Grace squeezed his hand under the table and Lucy whispered, "We're so proud of you, Daddy." And somehow, that made it bearable. The gala raised $4 million. By the end of the foundation's first year, they'd helped over 400 families and were expanding into 3 new states. They hired 12 more staff members. They partnered with 23 hospitals, 15 community centers, and 8 universities. They created a scholarship program in Daniel's name that would send 50 kids to college who otherwise couldn't afford it. And through it all, Ethan never forgot where he came from. He made sure the foundation's office hours included evening appointments for people who couldn't take time off work. He implemented a policy that every application would be read by someone who'd experienced hardship themselves. He visited the families they helped, listened to their stories, cried with them over kitchen tables and in living rooms, and made sure they knew they weren't alone. One evening, almost a year after that rainy night on the highway, Ethan was working late at the office when his phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize, but something made him answer. "Mr. Ward, this is Jennifer Chen. You don't know me, but 6 months ago, your foundation paid off my family's medical debt, $32,000 for my daughter's cancer treatment." Ethan's breath caught. This was the first family he'd helped, the application that had broken his heart. "Jennifer, how is your daughter?" "She's in remission. She's back in school. And Mr. Ward, we kept our house. We're going to make it because of you." Her voice broke. "I don't know how to thank you. You gave us our lives back. You don't need to thank me. Just pay it forward when you can. Help someone else when you're able. That's all the thanks we need." After hanging up, Ethan sat in his office and watched the city lights sparkle below. He thought about all the paths that had led him here. Sarah's death, Daniel's loss, years of struggle and pain, and barely hanging on. He thought about that rainy highway and the split-second decision to stop. He thought about Grace and Lucy, asleep now at home with his sister Rachel watching them, growing up seeing their father build something meaningful. His phone buzzed with a text from Charles. "Watching the news. We just got a mention on the national broadcast, Foundation of the Year finalist. Daniel would be beside himself with pride. Margaret and I are raising a glass to you tonight, to heroes who don't wear capes but tear off their shirts in the rain instead." Ethan smiled and typed back, "To second chances and new beginnings. Thank you for believing in me." He gathered his things and headed home, driving through streets he'd driven 1,000 times, but seeing them differently now. Every house held a story, every family faced struggles, and somewhere in this city right now, someone was drowning and needed a lifeline. Tomorrow he'd go back to the office and read more applications, approve more grants, help more families. It was hard work, sometimes heartbreaking work, but it was the most important work he'd ever done. When he pulled into his driveway, not a rental anymore, but a house he'd bought, modest but theirs, the porch light was on and he could see movement in the kitchen window. Rachel was probably making tea before heading home. The girls would be in their beds, dreaming whatever 7- and 10-year-olds dreamed about. Ethan sat in his truck for a moment, overcome with gratitude. For Charles, who'd turned tragedy into opportunity. For his team, who helped him daily. For his daughters, who'd stood beside him through everything. For Daniel, whose memory guided every decision. For Sarah, whose love still carried him through the hard moments. He pulled out his wallet and retrieved the small photograph he kept there. Sarah on their wedding day, smiling like she held all the secrets of the universe. He whispered to her, the way he did sometimes, when he needed to feel connected to her. "We made it, baby. The girls are okay. More than okay. They're thriving. And I'm doing something that matters, something that would make you proud. I wish you could see it. I wish you could see them." He traced her face with his thumb. "But maybe you can. Maybe you're watching somehow, throwing us those signs Lucy talks about. If you are, I hope you know we're going to be okay. We're going to be more than okay." Inside, Rachel had indeed made tea and was waiting at the kitchen table with 2 cups. "Big day?" she asked as Ethan sat down. "Foundation got nominated for some award. Charles is over the moon about it." And you? Ethan wrapped his hands around the warm cup. I'm just grateful. For all of it. Even the hard parts that led us here. Mom would be so proud of you and Daniel both. Dad, too. You're carrying on the family legacy. Wards help people. That's what we do. After Rachel left, Ethan checked on the girls. Grace was sprawled across her bed, a book open beside her. Lucy was curled up tight with Mr. Buttons and the 3 new stuffed animals Charles's grandchildren had given her. Ethan adjusted their blankets and kissed their foreheads, these 2 miracles who'd helped him save a life, and in doing so, had saved his own. In his bedroom, Ethan opened Sarah's journal to the last page, the one he'd read 100 times but needed to read again. Ethan, if you're reading this, I'm gone and you're struggling, but I need you to know something. Our story doesn't end with my death. It continues through you, through our girls, through every life you touch and every heart you open. You are going to do amazing things. You are going to love fiercely and give generously and show Grace and Lucy what it means to be human. And someday, when your work is done and you join me again, I'll be waiting to hear all about it. Until then, live fully, love completely, and never forget that you are, and always have been, enough. More than enough. Everything. Love eternally, your Sarah. Ethan closed the journal and placed it back in its special place. He changed into comfortable clothes and climbed into bed, suddenly exhausted, but peacefully so. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new families to help. Next week, they were opening a satellite office in Baltimore. Next month, they'd launch a new program for veteran families. The work would never be done, but that was okay. That was good even. It meant there was always more purpose to pursue, more lives to change, more chances to honor the people he'd lost by helping the people who remained. As sleep claimed him, Ethan's last conscious thought was of that rainy highway, of the decision to stop that had changed everything. He thought he was just saving a life that night. He hadn't realized he was also finding his own. The years rolled forward with the steady rhythm of meaningful work. Grace and Lucy grew, thrived, became young women who understood that privilege came with responsibility. Grace studied social work in college, determined to join the foundation after graduation. Lucy discovered a passion for medicine, inspired by the doctors who'd tried to save her mother and the families they'd helped whose medical crises had been eased. The foundation grew beyond anyone's initial dreams. 5 years after its founding, they'd helped over 10,000 families across 15 states. They'd erased $30 million in medical debt. They'd sent 300 kids to college. They'd prevented countless evictions, kept families together, given hope where there had been none. Charles remained involved until his passing at age 73, from a heart attack that was quick and, according to the doctors, far less cruel than bleeding out on a highway would have been. At his funeral, Ethan gave the eulogy, talking about second chances and the ripple effects of kindness, about how saving one life had ultimately saved thousands. Charles used to say he owed me everything, Ethan told the packed church. But the truth is, we owed each other. He gave me purpose. I gave him time. And together we built something that will outlive us both. That's the real miracle. Not that we found each other that rainy night, but what we chose to do with the second chance we were given. Margaret lived another decade, serving on the foundation's board and watching it grow into something neither she nor Charles had imagined possible. When she died peacefully in her sleep at 87, she left her entire estate to the foundation, over $100 million that ensured its work would continue for generations. Ethan Ward never stopped being surprised by where life had taken him. The mechanic from nowhere became the director of one of the most respected charitable foundations in the country. He spoke at conferences, advised other nonprofits, mentored young people who wanted to make a difference. But he never forgot the work at the heart of it all, reading applications, approving grants, helping families one at a time. On the 20th anniversary of that night on the highway, the foundation held a special event. Grace, now a program director at the foundation, and Lucy, a pediatric oncologist who volunteered her time to help families navigate medical crises, stood with their father on a stage and told the story one more time. The crowd of donors and families and staff listened with rapt attention as the Ward family described those terrifying, beautiful minutes in the rain. "My father taught us that night that every person matters," Grace said, "that you stop when someone needs help, even when it's hard, even when it's scary, even when no one else will. And Charles taught us that gratitude isn't just saying thank you, Lucy added. It's using your resources, your influence, your life to make the world better for others. That's what this foundation does every day. Ethan stood between his daughters, now grown women who'd become exactly the kind of people Sarah would have been proud of, and felt the full weight of the journey they'd traveled together. 20 years ago, I was a man who'd lost everything, he said to the crowd. My wife, my hope, my sense of purpose. I was going through the motions of living without really being alive. And then one rainy night, I had a choice. Keep driving or stop to help. I stopped. And that choice changed everything. Not just for Charles, but for me, for my daughters, for every family we've been able to help since then. He looked at Grace and Lucy, his voice thick with emotion. The truth is, I didn't save Charles that night. We saved each other. And in doing so, we discovered that the greatest gift you can give someone isn't money or status or comfort. It's the chance to become who they were meant to be. Charles gave me that chance. And now, through this foundation, we get to give that chance to others. That's legacy. That's love. That's what matters. The applause was thunderous, but Ethan barely heard it. He was thinking about Daniel, about Sarah, about Charles and Margaret, about all the people who'd shaped him into the man standing here today. He was thinking about the family in Texas whose medical debt they'd paid, who'd sent a Christmas card every year for 15 years, about the single mother in Seattle whose rent they'd covered, who'd gone back to school and was now a teacher, about the countless others whose stories he'd never know, but whose lives had been quietly, permanently changed. After the event, after the crowds had dispersed and the venue was empty, Ethan stood outside looking up at the stars. Grace and Lucy joined him, one on each side, the way they'd stood so many times before. Mom would be really proud, Grace said softly. Uncle Daniel, too, Lucy added. They are proud, Ethan said with certainty. Wherever they are, whatever comes after this life, they're proud, because we didn't let tragedy break us. We let it remake us into something better. They stood together in comfortable silence, three people who'd been through hell and come out stronger, who'd turned pain into purpose and loss into legacy. The foundation would continue long after they were gone, helping families they'd never meet, spreading ripples of kindness into a future they couldn't see. But that was okay. That was good. Because the point of leaving a legacy wasn't to see where it led. It was to trust that the seeds you planted would grow into something beautiful, something lasting, something that made the world a little bit better than you found it. Ethan Ward had been a mechanic, a widower, a single father struggling to survive. He'd become a director, a philanthropist, a man who'd helped thousands. But more than any title or achievement, he was simply someone who'd stopped on a highway in the rain when no one else would. And that single choice, that one moment of courage and compassion, had changed everything. Not just for him, not just for Charles, but for every person whose life they'd touched, every family they'd helped, every child they'd sent to college, every debt they'd erased, every hope they'd restored. The ripples spread out in all directions, touching shores Ethan would never see, creating waves of kindness that would wash over generations yet to come. And somewhere, in some place beyond understanding, Ethan liked to imagine that Sarah and Daniel and Charles and Margaret were watching, were proud, were celebrating the beautiful impossibility of it all. That one rainy night, one dying man, one mechanic with a big heart, and two brave little girls had started something that would never, ever end. The work would continue. The foundation would grow. New families would be helped, new lives changed, new stories written. But the heart of it all would remain the same. The simple, profound truth that when someone needs help, you stop. You don't look away. You don't film. You don't judge. You help, because that's what it means to be human. That's what it means to matter. And that's what Ethan Ward, once just a tired mechanic on a rainy highway, had taught the world simply by being brave enough to care.